Rain hammered the neon-lit streets of Seoul as Amara Bennett stood cornered in a narrow alley, debt collectors closing in with fists ready to break bones. Her mother's hospital bills had consumed everything, every dollar, every dream, every fragment of hope. Then a convoy of black SUVs pulled up, and a man in a tailored suit stepped into the rain like he owned the storm itself. Cael, the most feared mafia boss in Seoul. He knelt before her without hesitation, draped his cashmere coat over her trembling shoulders, and told her he'd purchased her debt that morning. The collectors vanished. But here's what shattered her world. 10 years ago, before he became untouchable, Cael had been Minho, the fragile scholarship kid she once defended in a school cafeteria when everyone else stayed silent. Now he'd returned wearing power like armor, looking at her like she'd been the center of his universe for an entire decade. Follow this story to the end. Hit that like button and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The rain fell harder. Amara Bennett pressed her back against the graffiti-stained wall of the convenience store, her waitress uniform soaked through, her fingers trembling as she clutched the envelope containing another overdue hospital bill. The three men blocking the mouth of the alley didn't care about rain, didn't care about her broken voice or streaming mascara. Last chance, the one in the leather jacket said. His breath smelled like cigarettes and cheap soju. 20 million won. Tonight. I don't have it. Her voice came out cracked, desperate. I need more time. Your mother's problems aren't ours. He stepped closer. The other two flanked him, predators closing the circle. You signed the contract. You knew the terms. Amara's throat tightened. She'd been so stupid, so desperate, when her mother's cancer treatments exceeded what the public hospital could provide. When the experimental drug offered a chance at survival, she'd borrowed from the first lender who didn't ask questions. She should have known better, should have understood that mercy didn't exist in Seoul's underground economy. Please, the word tasted like ash. One more week, I get paid Friday. I can give you half. Leather jacket backhanded her across the face. The impact sent her stumbling sideways, hip cracking against a dumpster, vision exploding white. Blood filled her mouth, hot and metallic. You don't negotiate, he said flatly. You pay, or we take payment another way. One of the other men grabbed her wrist. Amara screamed. Then headlights flooded the alley. Not ordinary headlights, the kind that belonged to vehicles worth more than her entire building. 3 black SUVs rolled into the narrow space with absolute silence, their engines purring like sleeping panthers. The debt collectors froze. The center SUV's rear door opened and a man stepped into the rain. Tailored black suit, white shirt, no tie. Dark hair swept back from a face carved from stone and expensive genetics. He moved with the kind of controlled grace that made violent men hesitate. Not because he looked strong, but because he looked certain, like gravity obeyed him before physics did. Let her go, the man said quietly. His voice carried no threat, no anger, just absolute expectation of obedience. Leather jacket released Amara's wrist immediately. His face had gone pale. Mr. Choi, we didn't know. I purchased her debt this morning, Cael Choi said, still walking forward through the rain. Water streamed off his shoulders. He didn't blink. The contract transferred to my holding company at 9 a.m., which means you're currently assaulting my property. The word property hit Amara like a second slap. But Leather Jacket and his crew were already backing away, hands raised, stuttering apologies that dissolved into the rain-soaked darkness. Within seconds, they'd vanished into the Seoul night like they'd never existed. Amara stood there bleeding, shaking, utterly confused. Cael Choi stopped 3 feet away. Up close, she could see details. The perfect cut of his suit, the expensive watch, the thin scar along his left temple, eyes so dark they looked black in the alley's shadows, and something else, something impossible. He knelt. Not a crouch, not a casual bend. A full kneel in the filthy rainwater pooling around garbage and broken glass, expensive trousers soaking through, posture absolutely formal, like she was royalty, like he was a knight. Then he slipped off his black cashmere coat and draped it over her shoulders with hands that didn't quite touch her skin. You're safe now, he said. Amara's brain stuttered. This didn't make sense. Mafia bosses didn't kneel, didn't protect, didn't look at random waitresses like they mattered. But his eyes, something about his eyes made her breath catch. Who are you? She whispered. The ghost of something, pain, recognition, flickered across his face. Someone who's been looking for you, Cael said softly, for a very long time. He stood, gestured toward the SUV. My men will drive you home. There's a medical kit in the vehicle. Your debt no longer exists. The contract has been voided. Wait! Amara grabbed his wrist before thinking. The moment her fingers touched his skin, electricity shot through her entire nervous system. Why would you do this? I don't know you. Cael went absolutely still. For 5 seconds, he said nothing, just stared at her hand on his wrist like she'd performed a miracle. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible over the rain. You knew me once, he said, a long time ago, before I became this. Then he gently extracted his wrist from her grip, nodded to one of his men, and walked back toward his SUV. Amara stood frozen as strong hands guided her toward the open vehicle door. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne. The seat was heated. A first aid kit sat waiting on the center console. As the SUV pulled away from the alley, she looked back through the rain-streaked window. Cael Choi stood alone in the downpour, watching her leave. And for just a moment, his carefully controlled expression cracked. He looked devastated. Mpok. Amara woke the next morning in her tiny studio apartment, convinced she'd dreamed the entire encounter. But Cael's coat hung over her chair, black cashmere, still damp, and on her kitchen counter sat a sealed envelope. Inside, a hospital receipt showing her mother's remaining medical bills paid in full. Every treatment, every medication, every procedure for the next 6 months. Prepaid, anonymous donor. Her hand shook as she set the paper down. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A car will arrive at 7 p.m. Dinner. I owe you an explanation. K. Amara stared at the message for 10 full minutes. Every survival instinct screamed at her to refuse, to block the number, to pack a bag and disappear into the city's anonymous millions. But something else whispered underneath the fear. You knew me once. She spent the entire day at the hospital with her mother, holding her frail hand, watching monitors beep steady rhythms. Her mother slept most of the time, medicated and peaceful. The nurses confirmed the payment, confirmed the donor wanted to remain anonymous, confirmed Amara's mother could now receive the experimental treatment that might actually save her life. Someone must care about you very much, one nurse said gently. Amara said nothing. At 6:45 p.m., she stood in her apartment wearing the only dress she owned that wasn't a work uniform, a simple navy blue thing she'd bought for a job interview years ago. At 7 p.m. exactly, her phone buzzed. I'm downstairs. She descended the 5 flights of narrow stairs, heart hammering against her ribs, and stepped onto the street. The black SUV waited at the curb. Cael stood beside it, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. He wore a different suit, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, but the same controlled stillness surrounded him. He opened the door himself. You came, he said quietly. You paid my mother's medical bills, Amar replied. I figure I owe you a conversation. Something flickered behind his eyes. You owe me nothing. Then why am I here? Cael was silent for a moment. Then, because I need you to remember. The SUV drove them through Seoul's glittering evening traffic, past Gangnam's towers of glass and steel, past luxury boutiques and exclusive clubs, into neighborhoods where buildings didn't advertise their purpose and security cameras tracked every angle. They stopped in front of a residential tower that looked like it cost more than Amara's entire bloodline would earn across 10 generations. Cael led her through a private entrance, past security that snapped to attention at his presence, into an elevator that required a fingerprint scan. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seoul's nightscape. Minimalist furniture, dark marble, everything precise and controlled. Too controlled. Like a museum. Like nobody actually lived here. Sit, Cael said, gesturing toward a sleek dining table already set for 2. Please. Amara sat, watching him move through the space with absolute familiarity. He poured wine, expensive, French, probably older than she was. set it before her, sat across the table. They stared at each other. "You said I knew you," Amara finally said, "but I don't remember." "Haren Elite Academy," Cael interrupted softly. 13 years ago. You were a sophomore. I was a junior." Her breath caught. Haren Elite Academy. Seoul's most prestigious private school, where wealthy families sent their children to network and prepare for inherited empires. Amara had attended on a partial scholarship, cleaning classrooms after hours to cover the remaining tuition. She'd lasted 2 years before the social hierarchy and financial pressure broke her. "I don't remember anyone named Cael," she said slowly. "I wasn't Cael then." His fingers tightened around his wine glass. "My name was Minho, Park Minho." The name hit her like cold water. Park Minho. Oh God. The quiet kid. The scholarship student everyone mocked. Thick glasses held together with tape. Worn uniform. Always alone in the library. Always carrying that battered sketchbook full of architectural drawings. She'd forgotten. How had she forgotten? "You remember," Cael said, watching her face. Amara's mind spun backward through 13 years of buried memories. The cafeteria incident. She'd been eating lunch alone, as usual, when a group of wealthy boys surrounded Minho's table. They'd grabbed his sketchbook, started ripping pages out, mocking his drawings, calling him trash, saying scholarship kids polluted the school's reputation. Everyone watched. Nobody intervened, except Amara. She'd walked over, grabbed the sketchbook, and told them to leave him alone. Not because she was brave, because watching someone get destroyed in public felt too much like looking in a mirror. The boys had laughed at her too, called her names, but they'd gotten bored and left. Minho had looked at her with those enormous eyes behind taped glasses, said thank you in a voice barely above a whisper, and walked away. 3 days later, he disappeared from school entirely. Vanished. No explanation, no goodbye. She'd asked around. Nobody cared. Scholarship kids dropped out all the time. "You defended me," Cael said quietly, dragging her back to the present. "In front of everyone. When nobody else would." "It was nothing," Amara whispered. "It was everything." The weight in those 3 words made her chest tighten. "What happened to you?" she asked. "Why did you leave?" Cael set down his wine glass with absolute precision. "My grandfather found me," he said flatly. "I didn't know he existed. My mother had hidden me from her family my entire life. Changed my name, kept us poor and invisible, because she knew what he was." "What was he?" "Head of the Choi Syndicate, Korea's largest organized crime network." Cael's expression remained completely neutral. "When he discovered I existed, he took me, had my mother killed to eliminate loose ends, spent the next 10 years molding me into his heir." Amara felt the blood drain from her face. Cael continued in that same flat, terrible voice. "I tried to run. 4 times. They broke my leg the first time, waterboarded me the second. The third time, they killed the only friend I'd made. Another boy forced into the organization and made me watch. The 4th time, I stopped trying." Cael, "He died 3 years ago," Cael said. "Heart attack, sudden, convenient. I inherited everything." The unspoken question hung in the air. Amara didn't ask if he'd caused the heart attack. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. "Why tell me this?" she whispered. Cael finally met her eyes directly. "Because for 10 years," he said, "the only thing that kept me human was remembering that one moment in the cafeteria. When someone saw me as worth defending. When someone treated me like I mattered." His voice cracked on the last word. "I didn't become Cael Choi to build an empire," he continued. "I became Cael Choi so nobody could ever make me feel powerless again, so I could protect the one person who'd ever shown me kindness." Amara's throat closed. "You've been watching me." "Yes." "For how long?" "Since the day I took control of the syndicate. No shame, no apology. I've monitored your safety, paid your debts when they became dangerous, ensured your mother received treatment, bought the companies employing your landlord so he couldn't raise rent, blacklisted men who threatened you, destroyed businesses that tried to exploit you." The room spun. "You've been controlling my entire life," Amara said slowly. "I've been keeping you alive." "That's not your choice to make." "You're right," Cael stood, walked to the window, stared out at Seoul's infinite lights. But I made it anyway, because losing you, even the idea of you, would have meant losing the last piece of who I was before they broke me. Silence filled the penthouse. Amara should have been angry, should have been terrified, should have run. But instead she looked at the man standing at the window, tailored suit, perfect posture, absolute control, and saw the ghost of a fragile teenage boy with taped glasses and a sketchbook full of impossible dreams. Both versions existed simultaneously. Both were real. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Cael turned. His expression was carefully neutral again, but something desperate flickered in his dark eyes. "That's your choice," he said. "I can arrange secure housing for you. A better job. Continued medical care for your mother. You'll never see me again. Or?" He hesitated. For the first time since entering the alley, Cael Choi looked uncertain. "Or you stay," he said. "Here, with me. Let me keep you safe the way I should have been able to 13 years ago." "As what? Your prisoner?" As someone I care about." The vulnerability in his voice was devastating. "The only person I've ever cared about." Amara stood slowly, walked across the marble floor until she stood directly in front of him. Up close, she could see the details violence had carved into him, the scar on his temple, the perfectly controlled breathing, the way his hands stayed carefully at his sides, never quite relaxed, like he was always ready to fight, always ready to protect, never ready to be touched. "If I stay," she said carefully, "I'm not your possession, not your property, not something you control. I know. I need autonomy, freedom, the ability to make my own choices." "Yes. And you need to stop watching me like I'm going to disappear." Cael's jaw tightened. "I can't promise that." At least he was honest. Amara took a deep breath. "I'll stay. Temporarily. Until I figure out what this is. But the moment you try to control me, you'll leave," Cael finished. "I understand." She extended her hand. "Deal?" He stared at her hand like it might vanish. Then, very carefully, he took it. His palm was warm, calloused, the grip firm but controlled. "Deal," he said quietly. Neither of them let go. The first week was strange. Cael gave Amara an entire wing of the penthouse. Bedroom, bathroom, sitting room, private balcony. Everything she could possibly need. Staff brought meals at precise times. Security monitored every entrance. She wasn't imprisoned, but she wasn't exactly free either. Her phone had signal everywhere except inside the penthouse. Convenient technical difficulties, the staff explained. Every time she wandered toward an exit, Cael appeared nearby with some excuse, taking a call, retrieving documents, checking security systems. He watched her constantly, not possessively, not creepily, like someone guarding something infinitely precious and infinitely fragile. At night, they ate dinner together at the minimalist table. Cael barely spoke about himself. He answered questions directly, but revealed nothing beyond necessity. Amara learned he controlled 17 legitimate businesses, owned half of Gangnam's real estate, and maintained connections with everyone from politicians to smugglers. But she didn't learn what he liked, what he feared, what he wanted beyond keeping her safe. The warmth she remembered from the quiet teenage boy still existed somewhere beneath the armor, but it had been buried under 10 brutal years of violence and survival. On the 8th night, Amara couldn't sleep. She wandered through the penthouse's silent corridors, past rooms full of expensive furniture nobody used, until she found a door she'd never noticed before. Unlocked. Inside was a study. Dark wood. Leather chair. A massive desk covered in documents and closed laptops. And along one wall, a glass display case illuminated by a single overhead light. Inside the case sat a pair of glasses. Old, wire-rimmed, one lens cracked. The frames held together with yellowed tape. Minho's glasses. Preserved like a sacred relic. Amara's breath caught. "You shouldn't be in here." She spun around. Cael stood in the doorway, expression unreadable. He wore a white t-shirt and black pants, the most casual she'd ever seen him. Without the armor of suits and control, he looked younger, more vulnerable, more like Minho. "Those are yours," Amara said, pointing at the case. "Yes," Why keep them? Cael was silent for a long moment. Then he walked into the room, stopped beside the display case, stared at the broken glasses like they held answers. Because they reminded me who I was, he said quietly. Before the violence. Before the power. Before I became someone my mother would have been ashamed of. You're not... I've killed people, Amara. His voice stayed flat. Factual. I've tortured men for information, destroyed families, ruined lives. I've done things that would make you run screaming if you knew the details. She should have been terrified, but instead she stepped closer. Why? She asked. Why what? Why the violence? You controlled the syndicate. You could have done anything, built anything. Why choose this? Cael's hands clenched into fists. Because violence was the only language powerful people understood, he said. Because every time I tried mercy, someone used it as weakness. Because the world I inherited ran on fear and blood, and changing it would have required becoming a saint. He laughed bitterly. I'm not a saint. But you wanted to be, Amara said softly. The sketches, the buildings. You wanted to build beautiful things. His expression cracked. For the first time since the alley, the careful mask slipped completely. I wanted to build you a better world, Cael admitted, voice breaking. That's all I've ever wanted. To create a place where you'd never have to be cornered in an alley, never have to borrow from predators, never have to be afraid. Tears filled Amara's eyes. Cael, every empire I built, he continued, every alliance I forged, every enemy I destroyed, it was all architecture around your name, a fortress, a shield. Because 13 years ago you sat beside me when nobody else would, and that single moment became the blueprint for everything. The silence between them became unbearable. Amara looked at this man, this violent, dangerous, powerful man, and saw the truth he'd been hiding. He hadn't built an empire. He'd built a monument to a kindness he'd never forgotten. She crossed the remaining distance and placed her hand gently against his face. Cael froze. His breathing stopped, like he'd forgotten how to process gentle touch. You could have just called, she whispered. A sound escaped him, half laugh, half sob. I know, he said, but I was terrified you'd forgotten me, that I'd just be another stranger asking for your time, that the moment in the cafeteria meant nothing to you. It didn't mean nothing. Then why did you forget? The question hit like a blade. Amara took a shaky breath. Because remembering hurt. Because after you disappeared, I asked around and nobody cared. It felt like you'd never existed. Like kindness didn't matter. Like I'd wasted energy defending someone who'd just vanished anyway. Cael's eyes closed. So I buried it, she continued. Convinced myself it didn't matter. That you didn't matter. Because accepting that you'd mattered and then disappeared was too painful. When Cael opened his eyes again, they were wet. I'm sorry, he said. For what? For disappearing. For not being strong enough to fight back. For building all this. He gestured at the penthouse, the city beyond, the empire, instead of just finding you and asking if you remembered. Amara's thumb brushed across his cheekbone. I remember now, she said. Cael caught her wrist gently, held her hand against his face like she was something holy. Don't leave, he whispered. Please. I know I don't deserve... You don't? She interrupted. But I'm not leaving. Why? She smiled sadly. Because that scared kid with the taped glasses is still in there, and he deserves someone to sit beside him. Cael's control finally shattered. He pulled her into his arms, not demanding, not possessive, but desperate and grateful and terrified, and held her like she was the only solid thing in a collapsing world. Amara wrapped her arms around him and felt him shake, the most feared man in Seoul, trembling. They stood there in the study, surrounded by the ghost of who he'd been and the monument of who he'd become. And for the first time in 13 years, Park Min-ho let himself cry. Everything changed after that night. Cael stopped hiding. He told her stories about the brutal years with his grandfather, the training that stripped away weakness, the missions that destroyed his innocence, the moment he realized he'd become the thing he once feared. Amara listened without judgment, and slowly, carefully, she began rebuilding the bridge between Min-ho and Cael. But Seoul's underworld didn't stop moving because its king had found something to care about. 3 weeks after Amara moved into the penthouse, Cael received a message during breakfast. He read it, expression going absolutely cold. "What's wrong?" Amara asked. "The annual syndicate summit," he said flatly. "Next week. Every major player in Seoul's underground will attend." "So?" Cael set down his phone with controlled precision. "So they'll expect me to bring someone," he said, "to prove I'm not weak, not compromised, not distracted." Understanding crashed through her. "You want me to go," she said slowly. "I want you safe. But if I attend alone, it signals vulnerability. If I bring you—" He stopped. "They'll see you, know you, target you." "Then don't go." "I have to. Absence means abdication." Amara studied his face, the careful control, the fear underneath. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked. Cael hesitated, then, "Some of the men who humiliated me at Haren Academy will be there. They've built legitimate empires on dirty foundations, married into political families, become untouchable. And?" His eyes met hers. "And I've spent 13 years acquiring every company, every financial system, every piece of leverage keeping their empires alive." Amara's breath caught. "You planned this," she whispered. "I've planned everything. No apology, no shame. Every move since taking control has led to this moment. The summit is where Seoul's power structure becomes visible, where masks come off, where I can finally make them understand what they did. This is revenge. This is justice. Cael is. They broke me," he said quietly, "turned me into something I never wanted to be. And I need them to see what they created. I need them to understand that the powerless boy they mocked now controls every aspect of their lives." The darkness in his voice made her shiver. But beneath it, she heard something else. Pain. The need for validation, for acknowledgement, for some cosmic balance that said suffering mattered. "If I go," Amara said carefully, "what happens?" "You stand beside me," Cael said. "You let them see that the person I value most in this world is the same person who defended me when I was nothing. And then," his jaw tightened, "I make them apologize to you." "Why me?" "Because you're the only good thing that came from that place, the only proof that kindness existed. And I want them to admit, out loud in front of everyone, that they were wrong." Amara sat back in her chair. This was dangerous, cruel even. Using her as a symbol, dragging her into his revenge. But she looked at Cael's face and saw the fragile teenage boy underneath, still carrying wounds 13 years old, still desperate to be seen. "Okay," she said quietly. Cael blinked. "What?" "I'll go. I'll stand beside you. I'll let you have your moment." "Amara, you don't have to—" "Oh, I know. But I'm choosing to. Not because I approve of revenge, but because I think you need this to finally let go." Something in Cael's expression broke open. He reached across the table and took her hand, holding it like a lifeline. "Thank you," he whispered. She squeezed back. Neither of them mentioned that the summit would expose her to Seoul's most dangerous people. Neither of them acknowledged that after next week, her life would never be anonymous again, because sometimes love meant walking into darkness beside someone, even when the smart choice was running. The week before the summit felt like standing on the edge of a cliff waiting for someone to push. Amara watched Cael transform into something colder, more calculating. The fragile humanity he'd shown her in the study got buried beneath layers of strategic planning and controlled violence. He spent hours locked in his office taking calls in languages she didn't understand. Men in expensive suits arrived at odd hours, spoke in whispers, left looking pale. The penthouse staff moved with increased tension, eyes down, movements efficient. Something was building, something dark. On Tuesday morning, Cael's lead security officer, a scarred man named Jin, who'd served under Cael's grandfather, arrived with 3 garment bags and a jewelry case. "For the summit," Jin said, setting them on the dining table. His tone was respectful, but his eyes assessed Amara like a potential threat. Mr. Choi selected these personally. After he left, Amara unzipped the first bag. Inside hung an emerald silk gown that probably cost more than a year of her mother's medical bills. The second bag held matching shoes. The third, a black coat with fur trim. The jewelry case made her stomach turn. Diamonds, emeralds, a necklace that looked like it belonged in a museum. This wasn't clothing. This was armor, a costume designed to broadcast ownership. She found Cael in his office, surrounded by laptops and documents covered in financial data she couldn't parse. "I can't wear this," she said, holding up the necklace. Cael glanced up. "Why not?" "Because it's a statement. You're marking territory." "Yes. No apology. No shame. Every person at that summit will understand what you mean to me. That's the point. I'm not a trophy. You're the most valuable thing in my life," Cael said flatly. "I'm ensuring everyone understands that harming you means declaring war on me." Amara set the necklace on his desk with deliberate care. "And what if I don't want to be your most valuable thing? What if I just want to be a person?" Cael's jaw tightened. "You can't be just a person anymore, not after you agreed to stand beside me. The moment you walk into that summit, you become a symbol." "Of what?" "Of everything I've survived for." The weight in those words made her chest ache. "Cael," she said quietly, "this is getting dangerous. You're not just showing them you survived, you're provoking them." "Good." "That's not good. That's suicidal." He stood, walked around the desk until he was close enough that she could see the exhaustion carved into his face, dark circles under his eyes, tension in his shoulders. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I've spent 13 years building toward this moment," Cael said. 13 years acquiring leverage, destroying foundations, ensuring that everyone who hurt me would eventually have to bow. I can't stop now." "Why not?" "Because if I stop, it means they won. It means the scared kid with taped glasses died for nothing." Amara grabbed his face with both hands, forcing him to look at her. "That kid didn't die," she said fiercely. "He's standing right here, breathing, alive, building something real with someone who cares about him." "You don't understand. I understand you're drowning in revenge and calling it justice." Cael pulled away from her grip, turned toward the window. Seoul sprawled below them, infinite and indifferent. "What would you have me do?" he asked quietly. "Forgive them? Pretend the last 13 years didn't happen? Shake hands with men who destroyed my life and smile like it's all in the past? I'd have you choose yourself over your pain. Those are the same thing." The hopelessness in his voice broke something inside her. Amara crossed the space between them, wrapped her arms around him from behind. Cael went rigid, still not used to being touched without warning, but didn't pull away. "Then let me help carry it," she whispered against his shoulder blade. "You don't have to do this alone." Cael's hands covered hers where they rested against his chest. "I've been alone so long," he admitted. "I don't know how to be anything else." "Learn." They stood there in silence, Seoul's afternoon light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, two broken people trying to hold each other together. Wednesday afternoon, Amara's mother called. The penthouse phone system had been malfunctioning all week, Cael's security team monitoring everything, but her mother's number got through. "Sweetheart?" Her mother's voice sounded stronger than it had in months. The experimental treatment was working. "I've been trying to reach you for days. Where are you?" Amara glanced toward Cael's office door. Closed. Private meeting. "I'm staying with a friend," she lied. "How are you feeling?" "Better. The doctors say my numbers are improving. Whatever miracle paid for this treatment." Her mother's voice cracked with emotion. "I'll spend the rest of my life grateful." Guilt twisted through Amara's chest. "Mom, I need to tell you something." "What's wrong?" "Everything. Nothing." She was living with a mafia boss who'd been obsessed with her for 13 years. She was about to attend an underground criminal summit wearing diamonds worth more than their apartment building. She was falling for someone who'd killed people and would kill again without hesitation. "I met someone," Amara said instead. Silence on the line. "Someone serious?" her mother asked carefully. "Maybe. I don't know yet." "Are you safe?" The question landed like a punch. Was she safe? Cael had never threatened her, never forced her, never raised his voice. But she lived in a fortress surrounded by armed men, monitored by security systems, isolated from her old life, safe from external threats. But what about internal ones? "I'm fine, Mom," she lied again. "I promise." They talked for 20 more minutes about nothing. Hospital food, nurses, the view from her mother's room, normal conversation that felt like visiting a different universe. When Amara hung up, she found Cael standing in his office doorway. "You didn't tell her," he said. Not a question. He'd been listening. "Tell her what?" Amara's voice came out sharper than intended. "That I'm dating a crime lord? That would definitely help her recovery." "I'm not a crime lord." "What are you then?" Cael was quiet for a moment. "A businessman who operates outside legal frameworks to achieve objectives the law can't address." Despite everything, Amara laughed. "That's the most corporate way to describe organized crime I've ever heard." Something almost like a smile touched Cael's mouth. "I've been practicing." The moment of lightness evaporated quickly. "She sounds better," Cael said. "The treatment is working. Because of you." "Because you loved her enough to sacrifice everything trying to save her." Cael's expression softened. "I just provided resources." Amara walked toward him, stopped close enough to see the perpetual vigilance in his dark eyes. "Do you ever rest?" she asked. "Not really." "When did you last sleep through a full night?" Cael's jaw tightened. "I don't remember." "That's not sustainable. Neither is caring about people in my position. Yet here we are." The vulnerability beneath his sarcasm made her chest ache. "Come here," Amara said, taking his hand. "I have work. It can wait 5 minutes." She led him to the living room couch, sat down, pulled him down beside her. Cael moved stiffly, like sitting without purpose confused him. "Now what?" he asked. "Now you just exist," Amara said. "No strategy, no planning, just breathing. That's inefficient. That's human." Cael stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. Then, very slowly, he leaned back against the couch. His shoulders remained tense. His hands stayed ready to move. But he was trying. Amara rested her head on his shoulder. Cael went absolutely still. "Is this okay?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "Nobody's done this before." "What, rested with you?" "Touch me without wanting something." The quiet devastation in that statement made tears sting her eyes. She shifted closer, letting her weight settle against him. Cael's breathing changed, shorter, faster, like his nervous system couldn't process gentle contact without interpreting it as a threat. "You're safe," she whispered. "I'm never safe." "You're safe right now, in this moment, with me." Gradually, incrementally, Cael's tension decreased. His breathing evened out. His hand found hers, fingers interlacing. They sat there for 20 minutes without speaking. For 20 minutes, the most dangerous man in Seoul let himself be vulnerable. Then his phone buzzed. Cael checked it, and the softness vanished instantly. His entire body went rigid. "What?" Amara asked. "One of my informants just confirmed attendance lists for the summit." Cael's voice had gone cold. "All 3 of them will be there." She didn't need to ask who. The boys from Haren Academy, now men with empires built on corruption. "Their names?" Amara asked. Cael's fingers tightened around his phone. "Young Tae-min, real estate developer. His company has contracts with the city worth billions, built on bribed permits and displaced families. And the others? Choi De-hyun, no relation. Investment banker. Launders money for half of Seoul's criminal enterprises while maintaining a perfect public reputation. Married into a political family. The third? Park Ji-won. Cael's voice dripped venom. Entertainment executive. Runs modeling agencies and talent management. Also runs escort services and blackmail operations disguised as career opportunities. Amara felt sick. These weren't just bullies who'd grown up. They were predators who'd turned cruelty into profitable business models. "What are you going to do?" she asked. Cael stood, walked to the window, stared out at the city like he was calculating trajectories. "I'm going to show them what they created," he said quietly. "I'm going to make them understand that every cruel word, every humiliation, every moment they made me feel worthless, it all built the person who now controls their entire lives. Cael, their companies are mine, Amara. I've quietly acquired the parent corporations over the past 3 years. They just don't know it yet. Jung Taemin's permits? My shell companies approve them. Choi Dae-hyun's investment fund? Built on capital I've loaned through intermediaries. Park Ji-won's talent contracts? Enforced through legal firms I own. He turned to face her, and his expression was absolutely terrifying. Not because it was violent, because it was empty. Every path they've walked for the last decade has led back to me, Cael said. They've been living inside a cage I built brick by brick, and at the summit, I'm going to close the door. Amara stood, crossed to him, grabbed his shoulders. Listen to me, she said urgently. This isn't justice. This is you becoming exactly what your grandfather wanted you to be. Good. No, not good. You think destroying them will heal you? It won't. It'll just prove you're as cruel as they were. Cael's eyes flashed. They deserve it. Maybe. Probably. But what about you? What happens to you after you've crushed them? What's left? I don't care. I care, Amara's voice broke. I care about the boy who sketched beautiful buildings because he wanted to create something instead of destroy it. I care about the person who kept broken glasses in a display case because they reminded him who he used to be. That person matters, Cael. That person is worth saving. That person is dead. Then why keep the glasses? The question hit him like a physical blow. Cael stepped back, jaw working, hands clenching and unclenching. You don't understand, he said finally. Then explain it to me. I can't. Why not? Because if I let go of this, if I forgive them, then everything I've become was for nothing. His voice rose, control fracturing. 13 years of violence, 13 years of becoming a monster, all meaningless if I just walk away. Or, Amara said quietly, it means you get to choose who you become next. Cael stared at her, breathing hard, looking lost. Then his phone buzzed again. He checked it mechanically. Whatever he saw made his expression shudder completely. What? Amara demanded. Security footage, Cael said flatly. Someone's been watching your mother's hospital. Cold fear flooded her veins. Who? Unknown. Professional. They disabled cameras, avoided facial recognition. He looked up, and his eyes were absolutely lethal. But the timing isn't coincidental. Someone knows you're here, knows you matter to me, and they're establishing that they can reach the people you love. Amara's legs went weak. Is she safe? I'm moving a full security team to the hospital now. She'll have 24-hour protection. Cael was already typing commands. But this changes things. How? It means whoever's targeting her knows exactly how to hurt me. His voice went deadly quiet. Through you. By Thursday, the penthouse had transformed into a military operations center. Armed security rotated shifts. Tech specialists monitored every camera within 5 blocks of her mother's hospital. Cael barely slept, spending nights reviewing footage and coordinating responses. Amara felt like she was watching him disappear into the person his grandfather had built. Cold, efficient, ruthless. On Friday morning, she woke to find Cael sitting in a chair beside her bed, watching her sleep. How long have you been there? She asked. 2 hours. That's creepy. I know. No apology. But you breathe differently when you're sleeping. It's the only time you seem peaceful. Amara sat up, studying his face. He looked terrible. Skin pale, eyes bloodshot, jaw tight with exhaustion. Did you sleep at all? She asked. No. Cael, I can't. His voice was raw. Every time I close my eyes, I see scenarios where I lose you, where they hurt your mother, where I'm not fast enough or smart enough or brutal enough to keep you safe. He stood abruptly, paced to the window. I've spent 13 years building power, he continued, and it's still not enough, because power doesn't mean anything if I can't protect the one thing that matters. Amara got out of bed, crossed to him barefoot. I'm not a thing, she said gently. I know. And you can't protect me from everything. I have to try. She turned him around, forced him to look at her. Then start by taking care of yourself, she said, because you're falling apart, and I can't watch that happen. Something cracked in Cael's expression. I don't know how to stop, he admitted. Then let me help. She led him to the bed, made him lie down, lay down beside him. Cael was rigid at first, every muscle locked, breathing controlled. But gradually, as she held him, The tension began to ease. His breathing slowed, his eyes closed. For the first time in days, Cael Choi let himself rest. Amara stayed awake, watching him sleep, and wondered how much longer they could survive like this. Saturday evening, the night before the summit, Jin arrived with final preparations. The car will collect you at 8 p.m. tomorrow, he told them. Security detail will follow in separate vehicles. Rules are simple. Stay with Mr. Choi at all times. Don't accept drinks from anyone else. Don't wander off. Don't trust anyone. Comforting, Amara muttered. Jin's scarred face remained expressionless. The summit isn't a party. It's a negotiation space where everyone's armed and nobody's honest. People will smile while planning your murder. Even more comforting. After Jin left, Cael handed Amara a small device that looked like an expensive bracelet. Wear this tomorrow, he said. What is it? Panic button, GPS tracker, audio recorder. He fastened it around her wrist with careful fingers. If anything happens, anything, you press here. Every security asset I have will converge on your location within 90 seconds. Amara stared at the bracelet. This was real. Tomorrow, she'd walk into a room full of Seoul's most dangerous people wearing diamonds and a panic button, standing beside a man who'd built an empire on revenge. I'm scared, she admitted. Cael pulled her close, rested his forehead against hers. Good, he said quietly. Fear keeps you alert. Alert keeps you alive. Is that what you tell yourself? Every day. They stood there in the fading light, holding each other like the world might end tomorrow. Maybe it would. Sunday arrived with brutal sunshine and clear skies. Amara spent the morning with her mother via video call. Cael's security team had installed encrypted systems in the hospital room. Her mother looked better, stronger, asking questions about Amara's friend that she deflected with practiced vagueness. By afternoon, the penthouse staff began preparations. A hairdresser arrived, a makeup artist, people who worked in silence, transforming Amara into someone she didn't recognize. The emerald gown fit perfectly, custom-tailored to measurements she'd never given. The diamonds felt heavy around her neck, cold against her skin. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a stranger. Elegant, polished, expensive, everything she'd never been. Cael appeared in the doorway wearing a black suit that probably cost more than a car. His hair was swept back, face carefully neutral, but his eyes went wide when he saw her. You look... He stopped, seemed to forget how to speak. Ridiculous, Amara supplied. Devastating. The word hit different than beautiful. More honest. More dangerous. You clean up okay yourself, she said. Cael crossed the room, stopped close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive that probably had an Italian name. Last chance to back out, he said quietly. Are you asking me to? Part of me wants to lock you in this penthouse and go alone. And the other part? Needs you there more than I need air. Amara reached up, straightened his already perfect tie. Then I guess we're doing this, she said. Cael caught her hand, pressed his lips to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, formal, and completely at odds with the lethal precision in his eyes. Stay close to me, he said, no matter what happens. I will. I mean it, Amara. These people, they'll see you as a weakness, as leverage. They'll smile and calculate how to use you against me. Then we don't give them the chance. At 7:55 p.m., they descended to the building's private garage. 3 black SUVs waited, engines running. Security personnel in tactical gear checked weapons and communication systems. Jin stood beside the center vehicle, expression grim. Perimeter is secure, he reported to Cael. No suspicious activity. Route is clear. Cael nodded, helped Amara into the SUV. The interior smelled like leather and gun oil. As they pulled into Seoul's evening traffic, Amara watched the city slide past. Neon lights reflecting off rain-slicked streets, crowds moving through Gangnam's luxury districts, ordinary people living ordinary lives. She felt like she was leaving that world behind, crossing into something darker, something permanent. Cael's hand found hers in the darkness. Whatever happens tonight, he said quietly, know that every choice I made was to keep you safe. Cael, I love you. The words landed like artillery. Amara turned to stare at him, breath-catching. Cael's expression was carefully neutral, but his hand trembled slightly in hers. "I've loved you since the moment you sat beside me in that cafeteria," he continued. 13 years. Every day. Every decision. You've been the center of everything." Tears burned her eyes. "You can't just drop that now," she whispered. "I know. But if something goes wrong tonight, I needed you to know." "Nothing's going wrong." "You can't promise that." "Neither can you." Cael's jaw tightened. "I can try." The SUV turned off the main road, headed toward Seoul's financial district. Towers of glass and steel rose against the night sky like monuments to wealth and corruption. They stopped in front of a building that didn't advertise its purpose. No signs, no logos, just security and valet parking for vehicles worth 6 figures. Cael's door opened. He stepped out, turned, offered his hand. Amara took a deep breath and stepped into the night. Immediately, she felt eyes on her. Security personnel, valet staff, people moving through the entrance. Everyone stopped to watch Cael Choi arrive, and everyone noticed the woman beside him. Jin materialized at Cael's shoulder. "Summit's on the 42nd floor, private elevator. Guest list is locked down, no surprises." "Good." They entered the building's marble lobby, headed toward a private elevator bank. The doors opened immediately, responding to some signal Amara couldn't see. Inside, Cael pulled her close. "Remember," he said quietly, "you're not a victim. You're not prey. You're the woman who once defended me when nobody else would. Hold on to that." The elevator rose smoothly, numbers climbing. Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. At floor 42, the doors opened onto a private vestibule. And beyond it, through massive double doors, Amara heard the low murmur of Seoul's most dangerous people gathering for their annual summit. Music played softly, champagne glasses clinked, laughter echoed with calculated charm. Cael offered his arm. Amara took it, lifting her chin. Together, they walked through the doors. The ballroom beyond was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's nightscape. Tables laden with food and wine that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. And everywhere, dangerous people wearing expensive clothes and practiced smiles. Politicians stood beside gang leaders. Corporate executives toasted with smugglers. The entire city's hidden architecture of corruption existed under one glittering roof. Conversations died mid-sentence as Cael entered. Every eye turned toward them, toward her. Amara felt the weight of their scrutiny, calculating, assessing, measuring her worth as leverage against the man beside her. But Cael walked through the room like he owned it, because he did. He guided her toward the center of the space, nodding to people who bowed slightly in return. Everyone wanted his attention, his approval, his power. Then Amara saw them. 3 men standing together near the bar, drinks in hand, looking older and wealthier, but fundamentally the same. Jung Tae-min, Choi Dae-hyun, Park Ji-won. The boys who'd once torn pages from a sketchbook and called a fragile teenager worthless, now men with empires built on cruelty. Cael saw them too. His grip on her arm tightened microscopically. "Here we go," he said quietly. He led her directly toward them. The 3 men noticed his approach, and something flickered across their faces. Confusion, recognition, dismissal. They didn't remember him. Of course they didn't. Powerful people rarely remembered the powerless they'd destroyed. Cael stopped 3 feet away, expression perfectly neutral. "Gentlemen," he said smoothly, "it's been a long time." Taemin's eyes narrowed. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" "We attended school together. Haren Elite Academy." A pause. Confusion. Then Park Ji-won's expression changed. "Wait, you're Park Min-ho," Cael said. "Though I go by Cael Choi now. Inherited name. Different circumstances." The 3 men exchanged glances, remembering, understanding slowly dawning. "The scholarship kid," Choi Dae-hyun said slowly, "with the taped glasses. You disappeared." "My grandfather retrieved me," Cael interrupted, "spent the next decade teaching me the family business." The temperature in their small circle dropped several degrees, because everyone in this room knew what the Choi Syndicate's family business entailed. "I see," Taemin said carefully. "Well, Congratulations on your success. Thank you. Cael's smile didn't reach his eyes, though I should also thank you. For what? For teaching me valuable lessons about power dynamics, about how the world actually works, about what happens to people without protection. The three men shifted uncomfortably. That was a long time ago, Jiwon said. 13 years, Cael agreed. I've thought about it every day. Silence fell between them. Amara felt the threat building like atmospheric pressure before a storm. Then Cael's expression changed, became colder, more dangerous. I thought you might be interested in some business updates, he said conversationally. Young Taemin, your development company's permits are approved through Shell Corporations I acquired 2 years ago. One phone call, and every project you have breaks ground on gets indefinitely delayed. Taemin's face went pale. Choi Dae-hyun, Cael continued, your investment fund operates on capital loaned through intermediaries I control. The interest rates are flexible. Depending on my mood, Dae-hyun's drink trembled in his hand. And Park Jiwon, Cael's voice went deadly quiet. Every contract your talent agency enforces goes through legal firms I own, including the ones for your more questionable operations. Jiwon looked like he might be sick. You're lying, he said weakly. Am I? Cael pulled out his phone, showed them a screen. These are live feeds from your respective company servers. Watch. He tapped something. All three men's phones buzzed simultaneously. They checked them, and their faces went ashen. That's impossible, Taemin whispered. No, Cael said calmly. That's thorough. I've spent 13 years quietly acquiring every company, every financial system, every piece of leverage keeping your empires functional. You've been living inside a cage I built brick by brick. You just didn't notice the walls closing in. The ballroom around them continued its glittering performance. Music, laughter, the clink of champagne glasses. But in their small circle, the world had stopped. What do you want? Dae-hyun asked hoarsely. Cael's hand tightened on Amara's arm. I want you to understand what you created, he said quietly. Every cruel word, every humiliation, every moment you made me feel worthless. It built the person who now controls your entire lives. Then he turned slightly, drawing attention to Amara. This is Amara Bennett, Cael said. 13 years ago, when you were ripping pages from my sketchbook in the cafeteria, she sat beside me, defended me, treated me like I mattered when nobody else would. The three men stared at her. I don't... Taemin started. You wouldn't remember, Cael interrupted. She was a scholarship student too, invisible to people like you. But she saw me, sat beside me, and that single moment of kindness became the blueprint for everything I've built. Amara's throat tightened. This was it. The revenge he'd been planning for 13 years. So here's what happens next, Cael said, voice dropping to barely above a whisper. All three of you are going to apologize, formally, publicly, to the woman who showed me that kindness existed. You can't be serious, Jiwon said. Cael's expression didn't change. I'm holding every card in your professional lives. Your permits, your capital, your contracts. I can destroy everything you've built with 3 phone calls. So yes, I'm deadly serious. The three men looked at each other, calculation happening behind their eyes, pride warring with survival. Then young Taemin took a step forward. He looked at Amara, and something ugly flickered across his face. I'm sorry, he said flatly. No warmth, no sincerity, just compliance. Choi Dae-hyun followed. My apologies. Park Ji-won hesitated longer, jaw clenching, before managing. Sorry. The words meant nothing. Everyone knew it, but Cael's expression remained absolutely neutral. Thank you, he said. That'll be all. The three men couldn't leave fast enough. As they retreated across the ballroom, Cael pulled Amara closer. Are you okay? He asked quietly. Amara stared at him, at the man who'd just systematically destroyed 3 powerful people without raising his voice, who'd turned revenge into a corporate transaction, who'd made grown men apologize for childhood cruelty through financial leverage and veiled threats. I don't know, she admitted, because watching Cael operate, watching him wield power with surgical precision, had been both terrifying and mesmerizing. This was who he'd become. Not the fragile boy with taped glasses, Not the man who'd cried in her arms. This, a weapon shaped like a person, and she didn't know if she could love all the pieces of him. Cael seemed to sense her thoughts. His expression tightened. "I warned you," he said. "I know. This is what I am now. I know." They stood in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by Seoul's elite, and the distance between them felt infinite despite their proximity. Then someone approached. A woman in her 50s wearing a red gown and pearls. Her face was familiar. Amara had seen it in news photos. A politician. Someone important. "Mr. Choi," the woman said warmly, "wonderful to see you. And who is your lovely companion?" Cael's professional mask slid into place instantly. "Councilwoman Han, may I introduce Amara Bennett?" They shook hands, exchanged pleasantries. The politician asked careful questions, clearly fishing for information about Amara's significance. More people approached. Corporate executives, foreign investors, people whose names Amara recognized from headlines. Everyone wanted to meet the woman beside Cael Choi, because if she mattered to him, she was valuable. Leverage, a weakness to exploit. Amara felt it in every handshake, every calculated smile, every question designed to extract information. These people were predators evaluating prey, and she was being measured. An hour passed in a blur of introductions and champagne. She didn't drink. Cael never left her side, one hand always on her lower back, guiding her through conversations with practiced ease. He was charming, diplomatic, everything a powerful businessman should be. But Amara watched his eyes, saw how they tracked every person in the room, every entrance, every potential threat. He was protecting her, even while playing his revenge game, even while destroying his enemies. She was always his priority. Then the ballroom lights dimmed slightly. Music shifted, something slower, more formal. Couples moved onto the dance floor. Cael turned to Amara, offered his hand. "Dance with me," he said. Not a question, a plea. She took his hand, let him lead her onto the polished floor. Cael's arm slid around her waist, pulling her close. They began moving to the music, swaying in practiced rhythm. "I didn't know you could dance," Amara said. "I can't, but I'm good at pretending." Despite everything, she smiled. They turned slowly, surrounded by other couples, and for a moment the summit dissolved. The revenge, the danger, the complicated darkness between them. Just two people moving together. "I meant what I said earlier," Cael murmured against her ear. "I love you." Amara's eyes burned. "I know." "Do you?" He hesitated. "Do you feel the same?" The vulnerability in his voice broke her. "I don't know yet," she admitted honestly. "I care about you deeply, but I don't know if I can love all the things you are." Cael's grip tightened fractionally. "That's fair," he said quietly. They danced in silence. Then Amara felt it, the shift in atmospheric pressure that meant something was wrong. Cael felt it too. His body went rigid. "What?" she whispered. "Someone's watching us, specifically." "Isn't everyone?" "Not like this." Cael turned them slightly, scanning the crowd. Then he stopped. His face went absolutely white. Amara followed his gaze and saw a man standing at the edge of the ballroom, mid-50s, silver hair, expensive suit, eyes like chips of ice. He looked vaguely familiar, like he shared bone structure with someone Amara knew. "Who is that?" she asked. Cael's voice came out strangled. "That's impossible." "Who, Cael?" He pulled her closer, turned them away from the man's line of sight. "My uncle," Cael said flatly. "My grandfather's youngest son, the one who supposedly died in a car accident 10 years ago." Amara's blood went cold. "Supposedly?" "I saw the body, attended the funeral. He was dead." "Then who—" The lights cut out completely. The ballroom plunged into darkness. Screams erupted, glass shattered. And in the chaos, Cael's hand was ripped from hers. "Amara!" His voice cut through the darkness, desperate and terrified. She tried to respond, but someone grabbed her from behind. A hand clamped over her mouth. An arm locked around her waist. She was being dragged backward through the panicked crowd. Amara fought, kicking, clawing, remembering every self-defense lesson she'd ever absorbed through cultural osmosis. But whoever held her was strong, professional. They pulled her through a side door she hadn't noticed, into a service corridor. The door slammed shut behind them, cutting off the ballroom's chaos. Emergency lighting cast everything in sickly green. Her captor spun her around. The man with silver hair stood before her. Up close, the resemblance to Cael was unmistakable. Same bone structure, same dark eyes. But where Cael's eyes held carefully controlled intensity, this man's held madness. "Finally," he said, smiling, "I've been waiting years to meet you." Amara tried to scream. He pressed something cold against her neck. The world went sideways. Her vision tunneled, and the last thing she heard before consciousness dissolved was the man's voice, soft and amused. "Let's see what my nephew will sacrifice to get you back." Amara woke to the smell of salt water and rust. Her head throbbed with chemical-induced pain, vision swimming as consciousness dragged her back from darkness. Cold concrete pressed against her cheek. Her wrists were zip-tied behind her back, plastic cutting into skin. She blinked, trying to focus. A warehouse, abandoned by the look of it. Broken windows filtering gray morning light. The distant sound of water lapping against pylons suggested they were near the harbor, probably one of the old shipping facilities in Incheon that Seoul's development boom had left to rot. "She's awake," the voice came from above. Amara twisted her neck, looked up. The silver-haired man sat on a rusted metal chair 10 feet away, perfectly relaxed, watching her like she was a fascinating specimen. In daylight, the resemblance to Cael was even more pronounced. Same sharp cheekbones, same controlled posture. But his eyes were wrong. Too bright. Too eager. Like something fundamental had broken inside him and never healed. "Who are you?" Amara's voice came out hoarse, throat raw from whatever he'd used to knock her unconscious. "I already told you, Cael's uncle." He smiled. "Though I suppose introductions are in order. Choi Min-jun, formerly deceased, currently very much alive and extremely interested in you." Amara tried to sit up. Her balance was off, head spinning, but she managed to lever herself against a concrete pillar. "Cael thinks you're dead," she said. "Everyone does. That was the point." Min-jun stood, began pacing in a slow circle around her. "Faking my death was remarkably easy. A car accident, closed casket funeral. My father was so convinced I'd always been weak, too soft for the family business, he barely questioned it. Why? Because I needed to disappear, to operate outside the syndicate's structure while building something my father couldn't see or control." He stopped, crouched down to her eye level. "Tell me, Amara. May I call you Amara? What do you know about the Choi Syndicate's succession protocols?" She said nothing. Min-jun smiled. "The eldest son inherits everything. That was Cael's father, my older brother. But he died before I was even born. Car accident. Very tragic. Very convenient for my father, who never approved of his choice in wife." Amara's blood went cold. "You're saying—" "I'm saying my father has a history of removing inconvenient family members." Min-jun's voice stayed conversational, like they were discussing the weather. "Cael's mother, his father. Anyone who threatened the syndicate's purity or my father's control. And you? I was supposed to be the perfect heir, obedient, brutal when necessary. But I made a mistake." His expression darkened. "I fell in love with someone my father didn't approve of. A woman from the wrong background, wrong connections. When he found out, he had her killed. Made me watch. Then told me if I ever showed weakness again, I'd join her." Despite her terror, Amara felt a flicker of sympathy. "So you faked your death," she said. "I became a ghost. Spent 10 years building an operation outside the official syndicate structure. Weapons trafficking, information brokerage, offshore accounts my father never knew existed. And I waited. Waited for him to die. Waited for the perfect moment to take back what should have been mine. Then Cael inherited instead. My dear nephew." Min-jun's voice dripped venom. "The fragile little scholarship boy who somehow survived my father's conditioning and became exactly what the old man wanted. A perfect weapon. Cold. Calculating. Absolutely ruthless." He stood, resumed pacing. "Except he's not ruthless," Min-jun continued. "Because, despite everything our father did to break him, Cael kept one weakness. One soft spot that makes him vulnerable." Understanding crashed through Amara like ice water. "Me." she whispered. You. Minjun smiled. I've been watching him for 3 years, monitoring his operations, tracking his movements, trying to understand what made him different from my father. And every thread led back to you. The waitress he obsessed over, the woman he built an empire to protect. What do you want? Everything Cael has. The syndicate, the legitimate businesses, the underground networks, all of it. Minjun crouched again, closer this time. But more than that, I want him to suffer the way I did, to understand what it feels like when the person you love most becomes leverage against you. Amar's throat tightened. He'll kill you. He'll try, but first he'll negotiate. He'll offer me anything, money, territory, power, to get you back safely. And I'll take it all. Strip him of everything he's built, reduce him back to that powerless boy with taped glasses. And then? Minjun's smile widened. Then I'll kill you anyway, because the lesson needs to be complete. Love is weakness. Caring is vulnerability, and in this world, the vulnerable don't survive. He stood, walked toward the warehouse exit. I've already sent Cael your location, he called over his shoulder. He should arrive in about 3 hours. That gives us plenty of time to prepare a proper welcome. The metal door slammed shut. Amara was alone in the warehouse, with her wrists zip-tied and her heart hammering against her ribs. She had 3 hours to figure out how to survive, or 3 hours to accept she wouldn't. Cael stood in the summit ballroom, surrounded by chaos and bodies and broken glass, and his mind had gone absolutely blank. Amara was gone. Someone had taken her. His entire world had collapsed into that single devastating fact. Mr. Choi, Jin appeared at his shoulder, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. We need to move. Building security is compromised. Whoever did this planned for... Find her. Cael's voice came out hollow, empty. Burn Seoul to the ground if you have to, but find her. Sir, we don't even know who... Cael grabbed Jin by the throat, slammed him against the nearest wall with enough force to crack marble. I don't care about logistics, he said quietly. I don't care about protocols. I care about getting her back. So you will activate every asset I have. You will threaten, bribe, or torture every person in this building, and you will find out who took her. Jin's face was turning purple, but he managed to nod. Cael released him. Around them, the summit's attendees were being processed by building security and Cael's own teams. Politicians demanding answers, corporate executives making calls, gang leaders quietly slipping away before police arrived. But Cael didn't care about any of them. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered without speaking. Hello, nephew. The voice hit him like a bullet. Impossible. Dead. Uncle Minjun, Cael said flatly. Silence from the ballroom's remaining occupants. Everyone who heard the name looked shocked. Surprised? Minjun's voice carried amusement. You attended my funeral. Very touching eulogy, by the way. I especially liked the part about my gentle soul. What do you want? What I've always wanted, what should have been mine. But we can discuss terms later. Right now, I thought you might like to know your lovely companion is safe. Uncomfortable, certainly. Terrified, probably. But alive. Cael's hand tightened around the phone hard enough to crack the screen. If you hurt her... Sir. You'll what? Hunt me down? Kill me? Cael, I've been dead for 10 years. I'm very good at staying that way. Minjun laughed. But I'm willing to negotiate. Meet me at the old Hwaseong container facility in Incheon. Pier 17. Come alone, or I start removing pieces of her and sending them to you. The line went dead. Cael stood frozen, phone pressed to his ear, while his carefully constructed world burned down around him. Jin stepped forward cautiously. Sir, it's obviously a trap. I know. He'll kill you, kill her, take everything. I know. We need a tactical plan, surveillance, backup teams positioned. No. Cael's voice cut through the noise like a blade. I go alone. If he sees tactical teams, she dies. If he suspects I'm not cooperating, she dies. The only variable I can control is compliance. That's suicide. Then I die. Cael finally looked at Jin, and his expression was absolutely dead. But I die trying to save her, because without her, I don't care about any of this. The empire, the power, the revenge, none of it matters. He walked toward the exit, leaving chaos in his wake. Jin followed. At least let me drive you. Fine. They descended to the parking garage in silence. Cael's mind was racing through scenarios, probabilities, outcomes. Every calculation led to the same conclusion. He was walking into a slaughter, and he didn't care. The SUV tore through Seoul's morning traffic, heading toward Incheon's industrial waterfront. Cael sat in the back, staring at his phone, at the last message Amara had sent him 3 days ago. Thanks for the flowers. You didn't have to. I know, but I wanted to. Such a simple exchange. Now it felt like looking at a tomb. Sir, Jin said carefully, if this goes wrong, if you don't come back, what are my orders? Cael was quiet for a long moment. Burn it all down, he said finally. Every asset, every business, every connection I've built. Liquidate everything and create a trust fund for Amara's mother's medical care. The rest goes to charity, housing, education, the things I sketched in those notebooks when I still believed the world could be beautiful. And the syndicate? Dismantle it. Expose every dirty politician, every corrupt official, every criminal operation. Let it collapse. I don't care about legacy. Jin's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Yes, sir. They drove in silence through industrial wastelands, past rusted factories and abandoned warehouses, until they reached the waterfront. Pier 17 sat at the edge of functional infrastructure, a forgotten corner where shipping containers rotted and seabirds nested in crane machinery. Jin stopped the SUV 50 yards from the warehouse entrance. This is as far as I go, he said. Cael nodded, checked the pistol holstered beneath his jacket. Full magazine, one in the chamber. Probably wouldn't matter, but it was something. If I'm not back in 2 hours, Cael said, execute the contingency plans. Sir, that's an order, Jin. He stepped out of the SUV and walked toward the warehouse alone. Morning sun glinted off broken windows. Waves lapped against concrete pylons. Somewhere nearby, a ship's horn bellowed across the harbor. Ordinary sounds in an ordinary world, where Amara was being held by a ghost who wanted to destroy everything Cael had become. The warehouse door stood open. Cael walked through. Inside, industrial darkness broken by shafts of dusty light, the smell of salt and rust and old machinery. And in the center of the vast space, illuminated by a skylight, Amara sat zip-tied to a metal chair, alive, breathing, terrified, but unharmed. Relief flooded through Cael with physical force. Hello, nephew. Minjin stepped from the shadows, smiling. He looked exactly like the photographs from 10 years ago. Same silver hair, same sharp features, like he'd been preserved in amber. Let her go, Cael said. Of course, after we discuss terms. Name them. Minjin walked in a slow circle around Amara's chair. She tracked him with wide eyes, jaw set, trying to stay calm. I want full control of the syndicate, Minjin said. All legitimate business holdings, offshore accounts, political connections, everything our father built and you inherited. Done. I want you to publicly abdicate. Announce you're stepping down due to health concerns or personal reasons. Make it clean. Done. And I want you to disappear. Leave Seoul, leave Korea, take your broken girlfriend and whatever money I allow you to keep and vanish. Cael's jaw tightened. Done. Minjun stopped pacing. You're agreeing too easily. What's the catch? No catch. You want the empire? Take it. I never wanted it anyway. I only built it to protect her. Cael gestured toward Amara. If giving you everything means she lives, then you win. Something flickered across Minjun's face. Confusion, disappointment. You're supposed to fight, he said. You're supposed to refuse, to value power over love. That's what our father taught us. Our father was wrong. He made you strong. He made me a monster. Cael's voice stayed flat. But she reminded me I could be something else. So take the syndicate, take the money, take everything. Just let her go. Minjun stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a terrible sound, high and broken and completely unhinged. You still don't understand, Minjun said. This isn't about the empire, it's about the lesson. About proving that love is weakness, that caring makes you vulnerable, that in the end, power is all that matters. He pulled a knife from his jacket, walked toward Amara. No! Cael lunged forward. 3 men materialized from the shadows. Minjun's security team, weapons drawn. They grabbed Cael, forced him to his knees, pistol pressed to his temple. Minjun crouched beside Amara, held the knife to her throat. Watch, he said to Cael. Watch what happens when you let yourself love someone in this world. Amara's eyes met Cael's. No tears, no begging, just a quiet acceptance that devastated him more than screaming would have. I'm sorry, Cael whispered. For what? Amara asked, voice steady despite the blade at her throat. For bringing you into this. For thinking I could keep you safe. For loving you when I knew it would destroy us both. Don't apologize for that, she said. It's the only good thing you've done. Minjun's knife pressed deeper. How touching. Last words before the lesson. Wait. A new voice echoed through the warehouse. Everyone froze. A figure emerged from the far entrance, walking with careful confidence through shafts of dusty light. Jin, followed by a dozen armed men in tactical gear. Step away from her, Jin said calmly, or we turn this warehouse into a tomb. Minjun's face twisted. I told him to come alone. He did, Jin replied. But I don't take orders from ghosts, and I've spent 10 years serving Cael Choi. You think I'd let him walk into an ambush without backup? Laser sights appeared on Minjun's forehead. On his security team, dozens of red dots painting targets. You're surrounded, Jin continued. Outgunned, outmaneuvered. So here's what happens next. You release the woman. You surrender peacefully, and maybe, you live through this. Minjun's hand trembled on the knife. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then Minjun smiled. You're right, he said. I am outgunned. And he drove the knife toward Amara's throat. 3 things happened simultaneously. Cael tore free from the men holding him with strength born from absolute desperation. Jin's team opened fire, and Amara threw herself backward, chair and all, timing the movement perfectly to avoid the blade by inches. She hit the concrete hard, zip ties snapping on impact. Gunfire erupted through the warehouse like thunder. Minjun's security team went down first. Professional headshots, clean executions. Minjun himself took 2 rounds to the chest, stumbled backward, fell. But he was wearing body armor. He rolled, grabbed a pistol from a fallen guard, came up firing. Cael hit the ground, scrambling toward Amara. Bullets sparked off concrete around them. Jin's team advanced, laying down suppressing fire. Cael reached Amara, covered her body with his own. Are you hurt? He demanded. No, scared shitless, but not hurt. Despite everything, Cael almost smiled. Then pain exploded through his shoulder. He'd been shot. The impact spun him sideways, blood spraying across dusty concrete. Cael! Amara's scream cut through the gunfire. He tried to respond, but the world was tilting sideways. More shots, shouting, the sound of tactical boots on concrete. Then silence. Cael blinked blood from his eyes, looked up. Minjun stood 10 feet away, pistol aimed at Amara's head. Jin's team had him surrounded, but the geometry was clear. If they shot Minjun, his dying reflex would pull the trigger. Amara would die. It ends here, Minjun said, breathing hard. Blood soaked his shirt where bullets had cracked ribs beneath the armor. You want her to live? Then you die. That's the trade. That's the lesson. Cael struggled to his feet, shoulders screaming agony. Take me, he said. Let her go. Shoot me instead. Cael, no, Amara started. Shut up, he said gently. Then to Minjun, that's what you want, isn't it? To prove love is weakness? To show that caring costs everything? So prove it. Kill me. Let her watch. Make the lesson complete. Minjun's aim wavered between them. Something was breaking behind his eyes. You were supposed to fight, he said quietly. Supposed to choose power. That's what our father would have done. I'm not our father. Neither was I. Minjun's voice cracked. I loved her. The woman he killed. I would have given up everything for her. And he murdered her anyway. Made me watch. Told me it was a lesson about weakness. Then don't repeat his mistakes, Cael said. Don't become him. You wanted to prove love is weakness? You've already proven the opposite. You love someone enough to fake your death and spend 10 years in hiding. That's not weakness. That's survival. Minjun's hand started shaking. But she's dead, he whispered. And I'm still here, alone. What's the point? The point is choosing what happens next. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Minjun's arm dropped. The pistol clattered to concrete. "I'm tired," he said quietly. "I'm so tired of being angry." Jin's team swarmed him immediately. Zip ties and handcuffs, practiced efficiency. Cael stumbled toward Amara, fell to his knees beside her. She threw her arms around him despite the blood soaking his shoulder. "You're an idiot," she said into his neck. "I know. You were going to let him kill you." "Yes. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." "Probably." She pulled back, looked at his face, and burst into tears. Cael held her as best he could with one functional arm, pressing his face into her hair, breathing in the smell of her, salt and fear and something fundamentally alive. Around them, Jin's team secured the warehouse. Medics appeared, working on Cael's shoulder with professional speed, but Cael barely noticed. Amara was alive. He was alive. That was enough. Mitatin. 4 hours later, Cael sat in a private hospital room while doctors stitched his shoulder and Amara paced near the window, still wearing the torn remains of her emerald gown. Jin stood in the doorway, giving his report. "Minjun's in custody," he said, talking freely. "Wants full immunity in exchange for information on syndicate operations and offshore accounts even we didn't know about." "Give it to him," Cael said. Jin blinked. "Sir? Whatever deal he wants, I don't care. Let him disappear again, if that's what he needs." "That's extremely generous considering he tried to kill you both." "He's family," Cael said quietly. "Broken family, but family. And he's already lost enough." Jin nodded slowly, made a note. "The summit attendees are being processed," he continued. "Young Taemin, Choi De-hyun, and Park Ji-won are all demanding explanations, threatening lawsuits, making noise about— "Release the files," Cael interrupted. "Sir? Every piece of leverage I have on them, every fraud, every bribe, every crime, release it publicly. Let the world see what they are." Jin's expression shifted. "That will destroy them." "Good. It'll also destabilize several major industries, tank stock prices, cause political scandals." "I don't care." Cael met his eyes. "I built an empire on revenge and called it protection. But Amara was right. It's just made me into another version of what I hated. So burn it down, expose everyone, let the system collapse and rebuild into something cleaner." "And the syndicate?" "Dismantle it. Phase out criminal operations. Transition legitimate businesses to ethical management. Use the profits for the things I originally wanted to build. Housing, education, opportunities for people the system abandoned." Jin stared at him. "You're serious?" "Completely. That's billions of dollars, years of work, everything your grandfather built." "Everything my grandfather built was purchased with blood and suffering," Cael said flatly. "I don't want it anymore. I never did. I only wanted her safe. And I finally realized the best way to keep her safe isn't controlling everything around us. It's choosing to be someone worth staying with." Silence filled the hospital room. Then Amara crossed from the window, sat on the edge of Cael's hospital bed. "You're really going to walk away from all of it?" she asked quietly. "Yes." "What will you do instead?" Cael looked down at his bandaged shoulder, at his hands that had signed orders and broken bones and built an empire on calculated violence. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe architecture, maybe urban planning, maybe something that actually helps people instead of controlling them." "You'd go back to school? Start over?" "If that's what it takes to become someone you could love without reservations." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "Cael is—" "I know you said you didn't know if you could love all the things I am," he continued. "I heard you. And you were right. The person I became, the calculated violence, the revenge, the obsessive control, that's not someone worth loving. But maybe the person I was before my grandfather found me, combined with the resources I have now, could build something actually worthwhile." He took her hand carefully, mindful of the IV line in his arm. "I can't erase 13 years of darkness," Cael said. "But I can choose what the next 13 look like. And I choose you. Not as an obsession, not as something to protect at all costs, but as a partner, as someone I want to build a life with." Amara was fully crying now. "That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me," she managed. "It's also probably the most legally actionable, considering my history. She laughed through tears, pressed her forehead against his. They stayed like that for a long moment. Then Jin cleared his throat. I'll give you 2 privacy, but sir, one more thing. Cael looked up. There's media outside, Jin said. News crews, reporters. They're calling this the Summit Massacre, demanding statements, wanting to know what happened. Tell them the truth, Cael said. A ghost came back. A debt was paid. And a very dangerous man decided to stop being dangerous. Jin nodded, left the room. Amara shifted closer, careful of Cael's shoulder. So what happens now? She asked. Now we figure out who we are when we're not running from the past or building fortresses against the future. That sounds terrifying. It is. But you're still doing it? I'm still doing it. She smiled, kissed him gently. When they pulled apart, Cael saw something in her expression he'd never seen before. Hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope of survival, but the quiet hope of possibility, of building something real. 2 days later, Cael called a meeting of the syndicate's leadership in a private conference room at his corporate headquarters. 20 men and women who controlled Seoul's underground economy sat around a massive table, watching him with expressions ranging from confused to hostile. Cael stood at the head of the table, shoulders still bandaged, Amara seated behind him near the window. I'm stepping down, he announced without preamble. Shock rippled through the room. Effective immediately, I'm dissolving the Choi Syndicate as a criminal organization. All illegal operations will be phased out over the next 6 months. Legitimate businesses will transition to ethical management structures. Employees will be offered severance packages or positions in the restructured companies. You can't be serious, someone said. A woman named Park, head of the syndicate's smuggling operations. I'm completely serious. You'd throw away everything your grandfather built? My grandfather built suffering wrapped in wealth. I'm choosing something different. Another voice. And if we refuse, if we continue operations independently? Cael's expression went cold. Then I release every piece of evidence I've collected over the past 3 years to law enforcement. Financial records, communication logs, names, addresses, everything. You'll all be in prison within a month. Silence. That's blackmail, someone finally said. Yes, Cael agreed. But it's the last time I'll use leverage to control people. After this, you're free to make your own choices, just not under the syndicate's banner. He handed a folder to Jin, who began distributing copies around the table. Inside, you'll find details on legitimate business opportunities, severance packages scaled to your tenure, and contacts for legal counsel should you choose to cooperate with the transition. Those who want out completely will receive generous settlements. Those who want to continue in restructured roles will work under new management. Who? Park demanded. Cael gestured to Jin. Jin will oversee the transition period. After 6 months, independent boards will manage each company. I'm removing myself entirely. More shocked silence. Why? Park asked. You have everything. Power, money, control. Why walk away? Cael glanced back at Amara. Because I finally figured out what I actually want, he said. And it's not this. The meeting lasted 3 more hours. Arguments. Negotiations. Threats that Cael countered with calm reminders about evidence packages. By the end, 18 of the 20 leadership members had agreed to the transition. The other 2 stormed out, promising war. Jin would handle them. Cael was done handling things. When the conference room finally emptied, he and Amara stood alone among scattered papers and empty coffee cups. That went better than expected, Amara said. Half of them are already planning how to rebuild independently once I'm gone. You know that, and you're still doing this? I'm still doing this. She walked to him, wrapped her arms around his waist from behind. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. Cael closed his eyes, let himself feel the weight of those words. Proud. When was the last time someone had been proud of him for something other than violence or profit? Thank you, he whispered. They stood there as afternoon light slanted through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating Seoul's vast sprawl. Somewhere in that city, Cael's empire was beginning to crumble. And for the first time in 13 years, he felt something like peace. Back. 1 week later, Cael received an unexpected visitor. He was in his study, soon to be someone else's study, once the penthouse sold, sorting through files and personal effects when Jin announced the arrival. Minjun is here, Jin said carefully. He's wearing an ankle monitor, accompanied by federal agents. Says he wants to talk. Cael set down the documents. Let him in. Minjun appeared in the doorway looking smaller somehow. The madness had drained from his eyes, replaced by exhausted resignation. Thank you for seeing me, he said quietly. Cael gestured to a chair. Sit. They sat across from each other in silence for a moment. I wanted to apologize, Minjun finally said, for everything. The kidnapping, the threats, nearly killing you both. He stopped. I've been broken for a long time. I convinced myself that destroying you would fix me, but it wouldn't have. It would have just made me more like our father. I know, Cael said. You forgive me? I don't know yet, but I understand you. Minjun nodded slowly. I heard you're dismantling the syndicate, transitioning everything legitimate, walking away. Yes, that takes courage. Or cowardice, depending on perspective. No, Minjun said firmly. Our father would call it cowardice, but our father was wrong about everything that mattered. What you're doing, choosing love over power, rebuilding instead of destroying, that's the bravest thing anyone in our family has ever done. Cael was quiet. I'm leaving Korea, Minjun continued, part of the immunity deal. They want me gone. Permanently. I have accounts in Singapore, enough money to live comfortably if simply. What will you do? I don't know. Maybe find a way to be human again. Maybe just exist without anger driving every choice. He stood. But before I go, I wanted you to know she would have liked you, the woman I loved. She would have been proud of who you're becoming. Emotion tightened Cael's throat. Thank you, he managed. Minjun extended his hand. Cael stood, shook it. Goodbye, nephew. Goodbye, uncle. Minjun left, federal agents flanking him. Cael watched from the window as they departed, 3 black cars disappearing into Seoul's evening traffic. Another ghost, fading, another piece of the past, released. Amara appeared in the study doorway. Was that your uncle? Yes. How do you feel? Cael considered the question carefully. Like I'm finally letting go of things I should have released years ago. She crossed to him, slid her arms around his waist. They stood together, watching the city lights flicker on as darkness fell across Seoul. What now? Amara asked. Now we figure out what comes next. Any ideas? Cael thought about the old sketchbook, the architectural drawings of beautiful, impossible cities, the dreams of a fragile teenage boy who'd wanted to create instead of destroy. I have some, he said quietly, but I need your help. With what? Remembering who I was before I forgot how to dream. Amara smiled, pressed her face against his shoulder. I think I can do that, she said. Outside, Seoul continued its endless sprawl. Millions of lives intersecting and diverging, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. And somewhere in that vast complexity, 2 people who'd once sat beside each other in a high school cafeteria were finally figuring out how to build something real. Not perfect, not simple, but worth choosing, worth fighting for, worth becoming something new to protect. The fragile boy with taped glasses was gone. The monster built from violence and survival was being dismantled, and in the space between, Cael Choi was learning to be someone he'd never been allowed to be. Just human. Just himself, just enough. 3 months after Minjun's departure, Cael stood in an abandoned lot in northern Seoul where Haren Elite Academy once existed before developers raised it for luxury condos. Snow fell softly across the empty space, covering broken concrete and rusted rebar with white silence. He'd purchased the land through shell companies weeks ago, the last acquisition he'd make using syndicate resources before the empire dissolved completely. Amara stood beside him, breath misting in the cold air, studying the architectural blueprints he'd spread across the hood of their car. You're serious about this, she said. Completely. The blueprints showed a school unlike anything Seoul had ever seen. Open-plan classrooms, creative studios, no hierarchy-based seating arrangements, green spaces. And at the heart of the building, one room labeled simply Safe Room. A place where broken kids could exist without performance, without judgment, without fear. This will cost millions, Amar said. I have millions. For now, before the transition completes. And after? When the syndicate's assets are distributed and you're no longer, she hesitated on the word, powerful? Cael folded the blueprints carefully. Then I'll be an architect working on a meaningful project instead of a crime lord controlling an empire. Seems like a fair trade. She smiled, but worry shadowed her eyes. People don't just let go of power. Even your own lieutenants, some of them are angry about the dissolution. Park sent 3 messages this week demanding you reconsider. Park will adapt or face consequences. That sounds like the old Cael talking. He went quiet, jaw tightening. She was right. 3 months of dismantling an empire and the habits still surfaced. The instinct to threaten, to control, to solve problems through leverage instead of conversation. I'm trying, he said finally. I know, but trying isn't the same as succeeding. Cael turned to face her directly. Are you having doubts? About you? No. About whether you can actually walk away from everything you've been? Yes, constantly. The honesty cut deeper than anger would have. What do you need from me? He asked. Proof, Amara said quietly. Not words, not intentions. Proof that when the moment comes, when someone challenges you or threatens us or pushes back against the transition, you'll choose the person you want to be over the person you've been. That's fair. They stood in the falling snow, surrounded by ghosts of their younger selves, the fragile scholarship kids who'd once walked these grounds, the moment in a cafeteria that had somehow become the axis around which their entire lives rotated. Cael's phone buzzed. Jin's name on the screen. He answered. What? We have a problem. Jin's voice was tight. Park just went rogue. She's refusing the severance package. Claims she has enough dirt on the syndicate's operations to destroy what's left unless you meet her demands. Cael's stomach dropped. What demands? Full control of the smuggling operations, $20 million in operational capital, and your guarantee you won't interfere with her business going forward. That's extortion. That's leverage. She knows we're in transition, knows you're trying to go legitimate. She's betting you won't risk exposure during a vulnerable period. Cael was quiet, mind racing through scenarios. Sir? Jin prompted. How do you want me to handle this? The old answer would have been simple, surgical, a quiet accident, a disappeared file. Problem solved through violence wrapped in efficiency. But Amara was watching him with those careful eyes, testing, waiting. Set up a meeting, Cael said. Public location. I'll talk to her directly. That's a risk. She's unpredictable right now. Then I'll be unpredictable too. But I'm not solving this the old way. He hung up. Amara hadn't moved. What happened? One of my former lieutenants is trying to blackmail me into funding her independent criminal operation. And I'm going to talk to her instead of disappearing her. Something shifted in Amara's expression, pride mixed with fear. That could go very wrong, she said. I know, but it's the right thing to do. And if I can't choose the right thing when it's difficult, then nothing I've said about changing means anything. She kissed him then, quick and fierce and terrified. Don't die, she whispered against his mouth. I'll try not to. Duck. Jin arranged the meeting for that evening at a neutral restaurant in Itaewon, public enough to discourage violence, private enough for honest conversation. Cael arrived alone despite Jin's protests. He wore simple clothes, dark jeans, black sweater, no designer labels, trying to shed the armor of wealth and power, trying to be human instead of untouchable. Park sat at a corner table, flanked by 2 bodyguards who looked military-trained. She'd run the syndicate's smuggling operations for 8 years, efficient, ruthless, profitable. Cael had always respected her competence. Now she was leverage. He sat across from her without greeting the bodyguards. You came alone, Park said. That's either brave or stupid. Maybe both. She smiled without warmth. I'll be direct. I want what I outlined to Jin. Control of smuggling routes. Capital. Your promise not to interfere. No. Her smile vanished. Then I start releasing files tomorrow. Financial records. Client lists. Every politician and CEO we've done business with. The legitimate transition you're planning, It'll collapse under the scandal. Probably. Park blinked. You're agreeing? I'm acknowledging reality. You have leverage. I can't stop you from using it. Then why refuse my demands? Cael leaned forward slightly. Because giving you operational capital makes me complicit in future crimes, and I'm trying to stop being complicit. That's naive. Maybe, but it's honest. Park studied him like a puzzle with missing pieces. What happened to you? 3 months ago, you would have had me killed for this conversation. 3 months ago, I thought power was the only thing that mattered. And now? Now I think power is what you use when you've failed at everything else. Silence settled between them. The restaurant's ambient noise, conversations, clinking dishes, soft music, felt like a different universe. I need this, Cael, Park said quietly. I've spent 8 years building expertise in logistics. It's all I know. You're dismantling the only structure I've ever operated in. What am I supposed to do? Get a corporate job? Pretend I'm qualified for anything legitimate? The vulnerability beneath her anger was familiar. Cael recognized it. The terror of being powerless, of having your entire identity stripped away. What if I helped you build something legitimate? He offered. She laughed bitterly. Like what? International freight logistics? Customs consulting? Supply chain management? All the skills you've developed applied legally. I know people who run container shipping companies, port operations. They're always looking for experienced logistics coordinators. That's a pay cut. That's a life without looking over your shoulder constantly. Park's hands tightened around her water glass. You're serious? Completely. I'll connect you with opportunities, provide references, carefully sanitized ones, help you transition into legitimate work, but I won't fund criminal operations. That line I can't cross. And if I release the files anyway, out of spite? Cael met her eyes directly. Then you release them. I've already made peace with the possibility of everything collapsing. The only thing I can control is who I choose to be in the aftermath. Park stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed, genuinely this time. You've actually changed, she said, sounding amazed. I didn't think it was possible. Thought you were playing some long game, but you've actually chosen to stop being dangerous. I'm trying. It's going to get you killed. Maybe, but at least I'll die as someone worth mourning instead of someone worth fearing. Park signaled her bodyguards to stand down. They stepped back, confusion on their faces. Give me the connections, she said. The legitimate opportunities. I'll consider them. That's all I'm asking. But Cael, her expression hardened. If this doesn't work out, if I can't make the transition, I'm not going down quietly. I'll burn everything rather than end up powerless. I understand. She stood, extended her hand. Cael shook it. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, Park said, or the dumbest. I genuinely can't tell which. Neither can I. She left with her bodyguards, disappearing into Itaewon's evening crowds. Cael sat alone at the table, hands shaking slightly from adrenaline crash. He'd chosen conversation over violence, vulnerability over control, the person he wanted to be over the person he'd been. It felt like standing on a cliff edge. Terrifying, exhilarating, possibly suicidal. His phone buzzed. Amara. How did it go? I'm alive. She's considering legitimate options. No blood. That's progress. Or postponed disaster. Come home. I made dinner. The word home hit differently now. Not the penthouse fortress, but a small apartment they'd rented in Hongdae. 2 bedrooms, affordable, ordinary, where neighbors made noise and delivery drivers actually found the address, where life happened instead of being controlled. Cael paid the bill, stepped into Seoul's winter evening. Somewhere in this city, his empire was dissolving. Somewhere, former allies were plotting. Somewhere, the past waited to devour him. But tonight, someone had made him dinner. And that felt like the only victory that mattered. But 2 weeks later, everything went to hell. Cael was reviewing architectural permits in the apartment when Jin called, voice ragged with panic. Turn on the news, Channel 7, now! Cael grabbed the remote. The screen showed aerial footage of the construction site where the new school was supposed to break ground in a month. It was burning. Massive flames consuming the temporary structures, construction equipment destroyed, months of preparation turning to ash. The news anchor's voice cut through his shock. Arson suspected in the destruction of a controversial development project tied to Cael Choi, former head of the notorious Choi Syndicate. Sources suggest this may be retaliation related to his recent testimony against... Cael muted the sound. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. Someone had destroyed the school. The one pure thing he'd tried to build. The monument to possibility instead of revenge. Gone. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. "Did you like my message?" A familiar voice, male, dripping satisfaction. Young Taemin, one of the 3 men from Haren Academy, the real estate developer. "You did this," Cael said flatly. "I did, along with Daehyun and Jiwon. Consider it payback for the summit humiliation, for threatening our empires, for thinking you could just walk away without consequences." Cael's vision tunneled. That was a school for kids who... Oops, for broken scholarship students like you used to be, Taemin interrupted, which is exactly why we burned it. We wanted you to understand something, Cael. You don't get to shed your past and become noble. You're a monster. You'll always be a monster. And monsters don't build schools. They destroy them. The line went dead. Cael stood frozen in his apartment, phone pressed to his ear, everything he'd tried to become crumbling around him. The door opened. Amara entered carrying groceries, took one look at his face, and dropped the bags. "What happened?" "They burned it," he said hollowly. "The school, Taemin and the others destroyed everything." She crossed to the television, saw the footage, went pale. "Oh, God." "They did it to prove I can't change, to show me that trying to be better just creates more targets, that the only way to protect anything is through fear and violence." Cael, and they're right. He walked to the window, stared out at Seoul's indifferent sprawl. "I tried doing this the right way," he continued, voice dead. "Tried talking instead of threatening. Offered Park legitimate opportunities instead of making her disappear. Exposed corruption instead of using it as leverage. And what did it get me? A burned school. Mockery. Proof that weakness invites destruction." Amara grabbed his shoulders, forced him to turn around. "Don't," she said fiercely. "Don't let them win like this." "They've already won. They proved their point. Their point is that cruelty works. That might makes right. That broken people should stay broken. You're going to accept that?" "What choice do I have?" Cael's voice cracked. "I build something beautiful. They destroy it. I try to help people. They use it against me. I choose vulnerability. They exploit it. The world doesn't reward being better. It punishes it." "So you're going back? To violence? To control? To being exactly what they want you to be?" "I'm going back to being effective." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "Then you've learned nothing, absolutely nothing." "I've learned that nice guys finish last and dead. That idealism is a luxury for people with no enemies. That trying to change while your past is still hunting you is suicide." "And what about us?" Her voice broke. "What about the person you promised to become? What about choosing love over power?" Cael looked at her, really looked, and saw the woman who'd defended him in a cafeteria, who'd sat beside him when nobody else would, who'd believed he could be more than violence, and he knew with devastating clarity that he was about to lose her. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't apologize, choose." "I already have." He grabbed his coat, headed toward the door. "Cael, please, I'll fix this. Then we can talk. If you walk out that door planning to hurt them, there's no we left to talk about." He stopped, hand on the doorknob. Every fiber of his being screamed to turn around, to choose her, to be the person she believed he could become. But the school was still burning on every news channel, and the rage was too large, too familiar, too comfortable. "I have to do this," he said without turning. "No, you're choosing to do this. There's a difference." Cael walked out. Behind him, he heard Amara's sob. The sound followed him down the stairs, into the street, into the car where Jin waited with grim determination. "Where to?" Jin asked. "Taemin's office. Now." Jin pulled into traffic without argument. 20 minutes later, they arrived at Young Taemin's development company headquarters, a gleaming tower in Gangnam's financial district. Security was tight, cameras everywhere, professional protection. Didn't matter. Cael walked through the lobby like he owned it, Jin and 4 security personnel flanking him. The receptionist tried to stop them. Jin flashed something, probably a weapon, and she went quiet. They took the executive elevator to the 42nd floor. Taemin's corner office sat behind glass walls and terrified assistants. Cael walked straight through without knocking. Taemin looked up from his desk, face registering shock, then calculation. "You can't be here," he said. "I have security." "Your security works for companies I still technically own until month's end," Cael said calmly. "Transition contracts haven't finalized, which means for the next 3 weeks, I'm still the monster you tried to remind me I am." He sat in the guest chair without invitation. Jin and the security team positioned themselves at the door. "You burned my school," Cael continued conversationally. "Destroyed months of work, hundreds of thousands in materials, a project meant to help kids like I used to be." "Prove it," Taemin said. "I don't need to prove it. I know you did it. You know you did it. That's enough." "Then what? You're going to kill me? In my own office? That'll make you look great during your noble transformation." Cael smiled. It was the expression he used to wear during syndicate negotiations. Empty, terrifying. "I'm not going to kill you," he said quietly. "I'm going to do something much worse." He pulled out his phone, tapped a few commands. 3 years ago, I told you I'd acquired the shell companies approving your development permits. That was true. What I didn't mention is I also acquired the inspection companies, the environmental assessors, and the safety consultants. Taemin's face went pale. "Every building you've constructed in the last 5 years has paperwork signed by people I control," Cael continued. "Which means I have documentation of every code violation, every bribed inspector, every shortcut you've taken that makes your buildings profitable but dangerous. I'm releasing it all. Tonight. To media. To government oversight committees. To the families living in your buildings who don't know they're one earthquake away from collapse. You'll destroy my company. Yes. People will lose jobs. Investors will lose money. My family will learn what it feels like when powerful people destroy things you care about without consequences." Taemin stood, hands slamming his desk. "This is revenge. This is exactly what you claimed you were walking away from." "You're right," Cael said calmly. "It is revenge, and I'm choosing it anyway, because apparently I haven't learned to be better. I've just learned to justify being worse." He stood, walked toward the door. Taemin's voice followed him. "What about your girlfriend? Your noble new life? Amara, that was her name, right? What's she going to think when she finds out you chose destruction over growth?" Cael stopped. "She'll leave me," he said quietly. "She should leave me, because you're right about what I am. I'm a monster pretending to be human, and monsters don't build schools. They burn the world down when someone breaks their toys." He walked out. In the elevator, Jin spoke carefully. "Sir, are you sure about this? Once you release those files, there's no walking it back. Taemin's company will collapse. People will get hurt." "I know. And Miss Bennett is gone already. I saw it in her eyes when I left." The elevator descended in silence. At ground level, Cael's phone buzzed. "Amara." He stared at her name on the screen. Didn't answer. Couldn't. Because if he heard her voice, if she begged him to reconsider, he might actually stop. And he couldn't afford to stop, not when rage was the only thing holding him together. They returned to the car. Cael pulled out his laptop, began compiling the documentation he'd collected on Young Taemin's development company. Building inspection reports showing code violations. Environmental assessments doctored to hide contamination. Safety certifications signed by inspectors who'd been bribed. 3 years of meticulous evidence. Enough to destroy everything Taemin had built. His finger hovered over the send button. 1 click, and it would upload to a dozen media outlets simultaneously. No taking it back, no mercy. Just surgical destruction wrapped in righteous anger. The old Cael Choi. The effective one. The monster. His phone rang again. "Amara." He declined the call. "Sir," Jin said quietly, "you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." "Why?" "Because they need to understand. Everyone needs to understand. That trying to be better just makes you a target. That vulnerability is weakness. That the only way to protect anything in this world is through fear. You sound like your grandfather. The words hit like a blade. Cael looked at Jin's reflection in the car window. Saw his own face. Hard, cold, absolutely certain. Exactly like the old man who'd broken him. His finger was still on the send button. One click, one choice. One moment where he decided who he actually was. The phone rang a third time. Amara. This time he answered. What? His voice came out harsh. Don't do it. She was crying. Whatever you're planning, whatever revenge you're calculating, don't. They burned the school, Amara. They destroyed the one good thing I tried to build. So build it again, better, somewhere they can't touch it. That's naive. That's growth. Growth doesn't work when you're surrounded by predators. Then stop surrounding yourself with predators. Her voice broke completely. Move, change cities, start completely over somewhere your past can't reach you, but don't become the thing you hate just because it's easier. Cael closed his eyes, saw the school burning, saw Taemin's mocking smile, saw 13 years of pain and rage and carefully controlled violence waiting to be unleashed. I can't just let this go, he said. Yes, you can. That's literally what letting go means. It means choosing who you become next over who you've been. It means accepting that sometimes bad people win and good intentions fail and growth is harder than revenge. They need to face consequences. Then let the legal system handle it. Release the evidence to authorities, not media. Let justice be systematic instead of personal. The legal system is corrupt. Half those authorities are people I used to control. Then expose that too. But don't become the corruption you're fighting. Silence filled the car. Jin was watching him carefully. The laptop screen glowed with damning evidence. One click away from destruction, one choice away from becoming his grandfather. If I don't do this, Cael said quietly, they win. They prove that trying to change is pointless, that monsters stay monsters. And if you do this, Amara countered, they still win, because you'll have proven their point for them. Cael's hand trembled over the keyboard. I don't know how to just let it go, he admitted. I don't know how to sit with this rage and not use it. Then learn. Talk to someone. Find a therapist who specializes in trauma. Process what your grandfather did to you instead of redirecting it at everyone else. Choose healing over revenge. That sounds impossibly hard. It is. But so is being loved by someone. And you're choosing that too, aren't you? The question hung in the air. Was he? Or was he choosing familiar patterns wrapped in righteous justification? I'm scared, Cael whispered. Of what? That if I let go of the anger, there won't be anything left. That rage is the only thing holding me together. That without it, I'm just empty. Then we'll fill the empty together, Amara said gently, with better things, slower things, human things. But Cael, you have to actually choose them, not just talk about it, not just intend it. Choose it right now, in this moment, when it costs everything. Cael looked at the laptop screen, at Jin's careful expression, at his own reflection in the car window. Who was he? The fragile boy with taped glasses? The monster built from survival? Or something new, something that could hold both truths without being defined by either? If I don't send this, he said slowly, Taemin walks away clean. He burned a school meant for vulnerable kids and faces no consequences. No, Amara corrected. He faces consequences you don't control, which is different from no consequences. That's unsatisfying. Most of growth is. Cael's finger hovered over the delete button instead of send. One different choice, one different future. Tell me you love me, he said suddenly. What? I need to hear it. Before I make this choice, I need to know what I'm choosing for instead of against. Amara's breath caught audibly. I love you, she said. Not the monster, not the empire, not the power. You, the person who kept broken glasses in a display case, who sketched beautiful buildings, who's terrified and trying anyway. That person, I love desperately. Tears filled Cael's eyes. Even if I fail? Even if I keep making mistakes? Even if becoming better takes years and hurts constantly? Especially then. He hit delete. The files vanished. Evidence of young Taemin's crimes erased from the outgoing queue. No revenge, no destruction, just choice. I deleted it, Cael said into the phone. Amara sobbed with relief. But I need help, he continued. Real help. Professional help. Because you're right. I don't know how to process this rage without using it. And if I don't learn, I'll just keep cycling through the same patterns. I'll help you find someone. A trauma specialist. Someone who understands complex PTSD from organized crime backgrounds. Cael laughed weakly. That's a niche market. We'll figure it out. Together? Together. He closed the laptop, set it aside, looked at Jin. Taking me home. To the penthouse? No, to Hongdae. To the small apartment with thin walls and noisy neighbors. To wherever Amara is. That's home now. Jin smiled. The first genuine smile Cael had seen from him in weeks. Yes, sir. As the car pulled into traffic, Cael's phone buzzed with a message. Unknown number. He opened it. A photo. The construction site. New image, taken after the fire. Amara stood in the ruins holding a sign. Rebuild, better, together. And behind her dozens of people. Students from local high schools. Community organizers. Volunteers. All holding similar signs. Cael's throat closed. A second message appeared. You're not alone in wanting this. Come see. A. He showed Jin. Change of plans. The construction site first. Sir, there's something I need to see. 20 minutes later, they arrived at the burned lot. Cael stepped out of the car and stopped dead. The ruins were filled with people. Hundreds of them. Students, teachers, parents, community members. All gathered in the winter evening, holding candles and signs. At the center stood Amara, wearing his old coat against the cold. She saw him and smiled. Cael walked through the crowd in a daze. People moved aside, creating a path. Some nodded. Some looked curious. Some looked skeptical. But they were there. What is this? He asked when he reached Amara. This is people who heard about a school being burned and decided it mattered, she said. People who want spaces where kids can be safe without judgment. People who believe broken things can be rebuilt better. I don't understand. A woman stepped forward, mid-40s. Teacher, by her bearing. I taught at a school like what you described, she said. Before budget cuts shut it down. I've spent 5 years trying to find funding to rebuild. When I heard about your project and then heard someone burned it, I posted about it online, asked if anyone else cared. She gestured at the crowd. Turns out a lot of people care. Another voice. A teenager. Male. Familiar, somehow. You probably don't remember me, he said. I was at Haren Academy on scholarship, 3 years below you. I watched them tear pages from your sketchbook. It taught me that people like us don't matter. I've believed that for years. His voice strengthened. But this project, a school designed specifically for people the system abandons, it made me think maybe I was wrong. Maybe we do matter. Maybe someone actually gives a damn. More voices joined. Stories of bullying, of poverty, of being invisible in elite spaces designed to exclude them. Story after story of people who'd been broken by systems that valued wealth over humanity, and all of them standing in burned ruins saying, rebuild it anyway. Cael looked at Amara, completely overwhelmed. You organized this? I made a few calls, sent some emails, but they organized themselves. That's what happens when you give people hope instead of control. She took his hand. So here's the choice, she said. You can destroy Young Taemin and prove you're still a monster, or you can rebuild this school with the help of people who actually believe in what it represents, not because you're powerful, but because the idea matters. Cael looked at the hundreds of faces surrounding him, expectant, hopeful, believing he could be more than his worst moments. I don't deserve this, he whispered. None of us deserve the good things we receive, the teacher said, but we can choose to be worthy of them going forward. Cael turned to Amara. If we rebuild, if I actually commit to this, I can't go back. Can't use syndicate resources. Can't rely on fear or leverage. Just fundraising and community support and probably years of struggle. I know. We might fail. The money might run out. Young Taemin might burn it down again. We might, he might. Life doesn't come with guarantees. Then why try? Amara smiled, squeezed his hand. Because 13 years ago, a girl sat beside a boy in a cafeteria. It was one small moment of kindness, and somehow, impossibly, it changed everything. What if this school produces 1,000 more moments like that? What if broken kids who thought they didn't matter discover they do? Cael looked at the burned site, at the crowd of believers, at the woman who'd somehow convinced him he could be human instead of monstrous. Okay, he said. We rebuild, together, the right way. No shortcuts, no leverage, just honest work. The crowd erupted in cheers. Amara kissed him, fierce and quick and full of pride. There's the person I fell in love with, she whispered. For the first time in months, maybe years, Cael felt something like peace settle into his chest, not because the fight was over, but because he'd finally chosen the right battle. Around them, people began discussing plans, fundraising strategies, volunteer schedules, design input. The school was already being rebuilt, not by one powerful man controlling outcomes, but by a community deciding something mattered enough to fight for. Jin approached, expression carefully neutral. The syndicate transition completes in 2 weeks, he said quietly. After that, you'll have no official access to those resources. No leverage, no protection. I know. Young Taemin will still be out there, angry, looking for revenge. I know. You're choosing to be vulnerable. I'm choosing to be human. Jin nodded slowly. Then I'll make sure the transition goes smoothly. And after, if you need security for the school project, I'm available. Cael looked at the man who'd served him for years. You'd walk away from the syndicate? From the power? I'd follow someone I actually respect, Jin said simply. Power is easy to find. Integrity is rare. He walked away before Cael could respond. Amara squeezed Cael's hand tighter. You're building something real. We are, he corrected. None of this works if I'm doing it alone. They stood together in the ruins, surrounded by strangers who believed in possibility, while Seoul's winter night settled around them. Somewhere in the city, Young Taemin was planning his next move. Somewhere, the empire Cael built was dissolving. Somewhere, the past waited with teeth. But here, now, broken people were choosing to build something beautiful. And that felt like the only victory that mattered. Cael pulled out his phone, opened his notes app, began sketching. Not a school designed by one architect, but a space designed by dozens of voices, students, teachers, parents, people who understood what safety felt like because they'd never had it. Amara looked over his shoulder. What are you doing? Starting over, Cael said. The right way. Around them, the crowd began to disperse, but they left behind something precious. Hope. Fragile. Improbable. Worth protecting. Worth becoming someone better for. The fragile boy with taped glasses was finally building the impossible city he'd once sketched, not through power, through community, not through fear, through trust. And somewhere in the distance, dawn was beginning to break over Seoul's vast horizons. 6 months after the fire, the school existed as half-finished skeleton against Seoul's spring sky. Construction moved slowly without syndicate money. Every beam required fundraising. Every window came from donated materials. Progress happened in increments, volunteers working weekends, local contractors offering discounted labor, students from nearby universities contributing design work for course credit. It was messy, imperfect, beautiful in ways Cael had never imagined when he built empires through fear and leverage. He stood on the 3rd floor, still exposed to open air, no walls yet, watching Amara coordinate with the structural engineer about load-bearing modifications. She'd thrown herself into the project with fierce determination, learning construction terminology and building codes with the same intensity she'd once applied to surviving. She belonged here more than he did. These were her people, the scholarship kids, the invisible ones, the people society built systems to exclude. Cael was just learning how to exist among them without controlling them. His therapist said it was progress. Dr. Yoon was a stern woman in her 60s who specialized in complex trauma. She'd spent 3 months helping Cael untangle 13 years of violence from his sense of identity, teaching him the difference between justified anger and redirected pain, showing him how survival mechanisms that saved his life during captivity now sabotaged every relationship. The work was brutal, harder than anything physical he'd endured. Some days he wanted to quit, to return to the simple clarity of power and control. But Amara would look at him with those steady eyes, and he'd remember why he was trying. Cael, her voice carried across the construction site. The engineer needs your input on the safe room specifications. He descended temporary stairs carefully, joined them at the blueprints spread across sawhorses. The safe room was the heart of the building, a space designed specifically for students experiencing crisis. Soft lighting, comfortable seating, no windows facing common areas, soundproofed, a place to exist without performance. The engineer pointed to structural details. We can install the acoustic paneling you specified, but it'll require additional framing here and here. That's another $15,000 we don't have budgeted. Cael's first instinct was to write a check. He had money left. Not empire-level wealth, but enough to cover the shortfall without blinking. But that was the old pattern. Solving problems through resources instead of community. What if we did a targeted fundraising campaign, Amara suggested, specifically for the safe room? Tell people exactly what it's for and why it matters. The engineer looked skeptical. That'll take weeks, maybe months. Then it takes months, Cael said. We're building something sustainable. That means not relying on one person's money. Amara smiled at him. That smile still made his chest tight. 6 months of therapy, and he still couldn't quite believe she'd chosen him. Stayed with him through the ugly work of changing. Loved him despite knowing exactly what he'd been. I'll draft the campaign materials tonight, she said. We can launch by Friday. They worked through the afternoon discussing timelines and material orders and volunteer schedules. Ordinary problems with ordinary solutions. No threats, no leverage, just collaboration. As evening approached, most volunteers departed. Cael and Amara remained, walking through the skeletal structure as sunset painted Seoul's skyline gold and crimson. How's your mother? Cael asked. Good. Cancer's in remission. She's talking about visiting the construction site when it's safer. Wants to see what I'm building. What we're building. She still doesn't know exactly who you are, what you were. Cael was quiet. Are you going to tell her? Eventually, when I figure out how to explain that the man I love used to be Seoul's most feared crime boss. That should be a fun conversation. Amara laughed, leaned against a support beam. She'll either accept it or disown me. Either way, it's my choice to make. I'm sorry you have to make it. Don't be. You're not responsible for my relationship with my mother, just for showing up honestly in our relationship. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights flicker on. Cael's phone buzzed. Jin's name. He answered. What's wrong? Nothing urgent, but I thought you should know. Jung Taemin just filed for bankruptcy. His development company collapsed. Investors pulled out after independent audits revealed the same code violations you'd documented. Cael's stomach tightened. I didn't release those files. I know, but someone else did. Anonymously. Sent everything to regulatory agencies and media simultaneously. Who? Unknown. Sophisticated digital trail. Whoever it was knew exactly what they were doing and covered their tracks perfectly. Cael closed his eyes. Park. Had to be. She'd taken his evidence, or recreated it, and finished what he'd started. Justice through channels he couldn't control. Taemin's ruined, Jin continued. His family's cutting ties. Political connections evaporated. He's facing criminal charges for endangering public safety. Good, Cael said quietly. You're not angry someone took this out of your hands? No, I'm relieved. It means consequences happened without me becoming a monster again. Jin was silent for a moment. You've changed. I'm trying to. It suits you. They hung up. Amara was watching him carefully. What happened? Cael told her. Her expression shifted through surprise to understanding to something like pride. Justice found him anyway, she said. Looks like it. How does that feel? Cael considered the question honestly. 6 months ago, he would have been furious that someone else delivered consequences, that he'd lost control of the narrative. Now? It feels like maybe the world doesn't need me to fix it, he admitted. Like, maybe if I step back and let systems work, even broken systems, sometimes the right outcomes happen anyway. That's growth. That's exhausting. She kissed him softly. Come on. I made reservations at that place in Itaewon you like. Let's celebrate Park's anonymous heroism with overpriced pasta. They left the construction site hand in hand, walking through Hongdae's evening crowds toward the subway. Ordinary couple. Ordinary night. Everything Cael had never imagined wanting. Everything that mattered now. But 3 weeks later, Cael received an unexpected visitor at the construction site. He was reviewing electrical plans when Jin appeared with a teenager in tow. Male, maybe 16, nervous energy and defiant eyes. "This is Min," Jin said. "He claims he has information you need." The kid looked terrified but determined. "I worked for Park before the transition. She sent me with a message." Cael set down the blueprints. "What message?" Min pulled an envelope from his jacket. Old-fashioned, sealed with actual wax. Inside, a handwritten letter. Cael recognized Park's precise script immediately. "I'm writing this from Singapore, where I've started a legitimate freight logistics company using the connections you provided. It's harder than I expected, less profitable, but I'm sleeping through the night for the first time in years. I wanted you to know. I'm the one who released Taemin's files. Not because you asked, but because seeing you choose the difficult path instead of the easy one made me realize I could too. You were right about power being what you use when you've failed at everything else. I'd been failing for years, just didn't know it. The kid who delivered this, Min, he's been trying to leave the underground economy but doesn't know how. I told him you'd help, not with money, with guidance, with showing him what choosing different looks like. Consider it paying forward the chance you gave me. Don't disappoint him, or yourself." Park. Cael looked up at the teenager. Min was watching him with desperate hope barely concealed beneath practiced toughness. "How old are you?" Cael asked. 16, 17 next month. "School?" "Dropped out. Family situation made it impossible." "What did you do for Park?" Min's jaw tightened. "Deliveries, courier work. I didn't ask what was in the packages." "But you knew." "Yeah, I knew." Cael folded the letter carefully. "Why do you want out?" "Because I'm smart enough to know this ends badly. Prison or dead. Those are the only exits if I keep going." "What do you want instead?" The question seemed to surprise Min, like nobody had ever asked. "I want—" He stopped, started again. "I used to be good at school, math especially, before everything got complicated. I want that back. The feeling of solving problems that have actual answers instead of just surviving." Something in Cael's chest cracked open. He saw himself, the scholarship kid with taped glasses and impossible dreams. "Okay," Cael said. "Okay what?" "Okay, I'll help. But here's the deal. I'm not a miracle worker. I can't erase your past or guarantee your future. What I can do is connect you with resources. GED programs, community college options, maybe a job here at the construction site if you're willing to work." Min blinked rapidly. "You'd hire me? After I just admitted to criminal courier work?" "I've done worse. The question isn't what you've been. It's what you're willing to become." The teenager's tough facade crumbled. He looked about 12 suddenly, scared and hopeful and desperate to believe. "I'll work hard," he said. "I promise. I won't mess this up." "You probably will mess up," Cael said honestly. "Everyone does. But messing up isn't the same as failing. It's just data. You learn and adjust." He turned to Jin. "Can you get Min set up with the volunteer coordinator? Start him on basic labor, see how he does." Jin nodded, led the teenager away. Amara appeared from the safe room where she'd been installing temporary shelving. "I heard that," she said. "Heard what?" "You sounding like the person you were always supposed to be." Cael leaned against a support beam, suddenly exhausted. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted. "That kid needs professional intervention, social services, educational counseling. I'm just a former crime boss with money and guilt. You're someone who survived the same system that's trying to consume him. That matters." "Does it? What if I make it worse? What if I give him hope and he ends up more broken?" Amara crossed to him, took his hands. "Then you'll have tried," she said simply, which is more than most people do, and maybe trying is enough. "When did you become so wise?" "When I started dating someone who forced me to think about these questions constantly." Despite everything, Cael smiled. They returned to work, but Min's arrival settled something inside him. This was the path forward, not grand gestures or systemic change, just one person helping one other person navigate darkness, the way Amara had once helped him by simply sitting beside him. The school's grand opening was scheduled for late autumn. 8 months of construction, thousands of volunteer hours, fundraising campaigns that brought in donations ranging from $5 to $5,000. The community had built this. Not Cael, not his money or power or leverage. Just people who believed something mattered. The week before opening, Cael stood in the completed safe room, running his hands along the acoustic paneling they'd finally afforded. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, bookshelves stocked with donated novels and art supplies. A space designed specifically for students who needed to exist without pressure. Amara entered carrying a small box. "I have something for you," she said. Inside the box sat a pair of glasses, wire-rimmed, one lens cracked, frames held together with yellowed tape. Minho's glasses, the ones Cael had kept in a display case for 13 years. "I thought we could put them here," Amara said, "in the safe room, not as a relic, but as a reminder that broken things have value, that the kid who wore these survived and built something worth surviving for." Cael's throat closed. "I don't know if I want students seeing them," he managed. "Knowing they're mine, it feels like admitting you were vulnerable once, like using my pain for inspiration. That feels exploitative." Amara set the box on a shelf carefully. "What if we don't tell them they're yours? We just label them a reminder that broken things can be repaired. Let students interpret that however they need." Cael looked at the glasses. 13 years ago, they'd represented everything he hated about himself. Weakness, poverty, invisibility. Now they represented survival. "Okay," he said quietly. "Leave them." Amara placed the glasses on the shelf with a small placard reading exactly what she'd suggested. They stood together in the safe room, surrounded by everything they'd built. "Are you ready for this?" Amara asked. "Tomorrow we open. Students arrive. The press covers it. You'll be public again, visible, vulnerable." "Terrified," Cael admitted. "But yes, ready." What changed? He thought about Min, now enrolled in GED courses and working construction part-time. About Park, building a legitimate business in Singapore. About Jin, who'd chosen integrity over power. About the hundreds of volunteers who'd believed a school could matter. "I stopped thinking I had to do this alone," Cael said. "Stopped believing control was the same as safety. Started trusting that maybe community is stronger than empire." "That's very evolved of you. Don't get used to it. I'll probably panic and try to micromanage something tomorrow." She laughed, kissed him. They left the safe room together, walking through halls that would soon fill with students. Broken kids looking for spaces to exist, just like they'd once been. Opening day arrived with unseasonable warmth and clear skies. 200 students had enrolled, pulled from local schools with reputations for harsh hierarchies and academic pressure. Kids on scholarships, kids from difficult homes, kids who needed the safe room more than advanced calculus. Cael stood at the entrance wearing simple clothes, no designer labels, no armor of wealth, watching families arrive. Parents looked skeptical, curious, hopeful. Students looked wary, like they'd been promised safe spaces before and learned not to believe. Amara squeezed his hand. "You should say something. Welcome speech." "I'm not good at speeches." "Then be bad at speeches, but say something." Cael walked to a small platform they'd erected near the entrance. Someone handed him a microphone. The crowd quieted. He looked at 200 faces waiting for inspiration. "I don't know what I'm doing," he started. Surprised laughter rippled through the crowd. "I'm not an educator," Cael continued. "I'm not qualified to run a school. 6 months ago, I was someone you would have crossed the street to avoid." The laughter died. "I built this place because 13 years ago, I was a student at an elite academy where powerful people made me feel worthless, where every day was performance or punishment, where being poor and smart wasn't enough. You had to be wealthy and connected, or you were invisible." He found Min in the crowd. The teenager was watching intently. "One person sat beside me in that place," Cael said, gesturing to Amara. One person treated me like I mattered when everyone else pretended I didn't exist. And that single moment, that choice she made, somehow kept me human through years when I forgot how to be. His voice caught. This school exists because we believe moments like that matter. Because we think students deserve spaces where being human is enough. Where struggling doesn't mean failing. Where asking for help isn't weakness. He paused, looking at the building behind him. We're going to mess this up, he admitted. We're going to make mistakes. Teachers will have bad days. Students will feel invisible sometimes. The safe room won't fix everything. But we're trying. We're showing up. And we believe that trying matters. Silence. Then someone started clapping. One person. Then another. Then the entire crowd. Cael stepped down from the platform, overwhelmed. Amara was crying. That was perfect. That was terrifying. Same thing. The crowd dispersed into the building. Students exploring classrooms, parents asking questions, teachers welcoming nervous kids. Cael watched it all from the entrance, feeling strangely disconnected. He'd built empires before, organizations worth billions, networks spanning continents, but none of it felt as significant as this. 200 kids walking into a building designed to protect instead of exploit them. Mr. Choi. He turned. A woman in her 40s stood there, holding a teenage girl's hand. The girl looked about 14, eyes down, body language screaming discomfort. I'm Miss Lee, the woman said. This is my daughter, Hana. She's been having a difficult time at her previous school. Bullying, social isolation. We heard about your program. Cael looked at Hana, saw himself at that age. Welcome, he said gently. Would you like to see the safe room? Hana's eyes lifted slightly. What's that? A place where you can exist without anyone expecting you to be anything except yourself. Something shifted in the girl's expression, a tiny crack in the armor. Okay, she whispered. Cael led them through the building, explaining the philosophy as they walked. Amara joined them, adding details about student support systems and mental health resources. When they reached the safe room, Hana stopped in the doorway, stared at the soft lighting, the comfortable chairs, the books and art supplies. Nobody's going to judge me here? She asked. Nobody, Cael confirmed. What if I just want to sit quietly and not talk? Then you sit quietly. Hana walked into the room slowly, like approaching something precious and fragile. She saw the glasses on the shelf, the small placard. A reminder that broken things can be repaired, she read aloud, ran her fingers along the yellowed tape. These are really broken, she said. But still functional, Cael replied. Still useful, still worth keeping. Hana looked at him directly for the first time. You built this whole school? A lot of people built this school. I just helped. Why? The question landed heavy. Because someone once showed me kindness when I felt invisible, Cael said honestly, and it saved my life. I wanted to build a place where that kindness is systematic instead of accidental. Hana nodded slowly. Thank you, she whispered. Then she sat in one of the comfortable chairs, pulled out a book, and started reading, claiming the space, making it hers. Ms. Lee wiped tears from her eyes. Thank you. We're just getting started, Cael said, but we'll do our best. As they left Hana in the safe room, Amara took his arm. You saw it, right? She said quietly. Saw what? The moment. When that girl realized she could be safe here. When the armor cracked. I saw it. That's why we built this, for moments exactly like that. Cael nodded, throat tight. That evening, after students and families departed, after teachers finished setting up classrooms, after volunteers celebrated with donated pizza, Cael and Amara stood alone in the empty building. Night pressed against windows. Seoul's lights glittered beyond. How do you feel? Amara asked. Cael considered the question carefully. Exhausted, terrified, hopeful, unqualified. He paused. Proud. For the first time in my life, genuinely proud of something I've built. You should be. We should be. She smiled, leaned against him. They walked through the silent halls one final time, past classrooms and labs and the library Min had helped organize. Stopped at the safe room. The glasses sat on their shelf, illuminated by soft ambient lighting, a reminder that broken things can be repaired. "Do you ever regret it?" Amara asked suddenly. "Walking away from the power? The empire? You could have kept it all, stayed dangerous, maintained control." "Every day," Cael admitted. She looked at him sharply. "I regret how easy it was," he continued, "how comfortable, how simple the world felt when I could solve problems through fear. I regret that part of me will always want that simplicity back. But regret isn't the same as choosing. I regret how hard this is. I don't regret doing it." Amara was quiet for a moment. "I love you," she said finally, "not despite the difficulty, because you're choosing it anyway. Even when I'm terrified and unqualified and probably going to mess this up? Especially then." Cael pulled her closer. They stood in the safe room surrounded by everything they'd built together, and for the first time in his life, Cael Choi felt like he was exactly where he belonged. Not in penthouse fortresses, not commanding empires. Here, in a small room designed for broken kids. Proof that survival could be gentle, that power could mean protection instead of control, that love was choosing each other when it cost everything. Outside, Seoul continued its endless sprawl. Millions of lives intersecting and diverging, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. And somewhere in that vast complexity, two people who'd once sat beside each other in a high school cafeteria had finally figured out how to build something worth surviving for. Back. 5 years later, Cael stood in that same safe room, watching it fill with students during lunch period. The school had expanded. 400 students now. Additional funding from educational foundations impressed by their outcomes. Teachers who chose them specifically because the philosophy mattered. Min had graduated 2 years ago, now studying engineering at university. Hana worked as a student mentor, helping new kids navigate the transition. Park sent quarterly donations from Singapore with notes about her legitimate business thriving. Jin ran security for 3 similar schools that had opened using their model. The fragile experiment had become sustainable. Cael's hair showed gray at the temples now, lines carved deeper around his eyes. His shoulder still ached where Minjun had shot him, a permanent reminder of the violence he'd left behind. Amara appeared in the doorway, carrying architectural plans. "The city approved our expansion permit," she said. "We can break ground on the additional building next spring." "More classrooms?" "More safe rooms. 1 per grade level instead of sharing," Cael smiled. "Ambitious. You taught me ambition. I'm just applying it differently." She crossed to him, kissed him softly. 5 years together, 3 years married, still learning each other, still choosing each other. "Your mother called," Amara said. "She wants to know if we're coming to dinner Sunday." "What did you tell her?" "That we'd be there. She's making that dish you like." Cael's relationship with Amara's mother had taken years to build. The woman knew his past now, knew exactly who he'd been before trying to become someone better. She'd accepted it with the weary pragmatism of someone who understood that people contained multitudes. "How's the therapy practice going?" Amara asked. Cael had started seeing clients 2 years ago, other people trying to leave organized crime, kids from gang backgrounds, adults carrying trauma from violent pasts. Dr. Yoon had helped him get certified as a peer counselor, said his experience was valuable, that survivors could guide each other through darkness. Professionals only understood theoretically. It was hard work, confronting his past constantly, sitting with people's pain without fixing it. But it mattered. "I had a session this morning with a woman trying to leave her husband's trafficking operation," Cael said. "She's terrified, convinced he'll kill her if she runs." "What did you tell her?" "That fear is rational, that leaving might be dangerous, but staying is definitely dangerous. That sometimes the brave choice and the terrifying choice are the same thing." Amara nodded. "Did she believe you?" "I don't know, but I gave her resources, safe houses, legal contacts, showed her that infrastructure exists. What she does with it is her choice." They stood together in the safe room, watching students exist without performance. Some reading, some drawing, some just sitting quietly, being human, being enough. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't sat beside you that day?" Amara asked suddenly. Cael considered the question. "I'd probably be dead," he said honestly. or running my grandfather's empire, becoming exactly what he wanted, losing every fragment of humanity I had left. That's dark. That's honest. What changed it? Really? One person sitting beside you shouldn't have been enough to alter your entire trajectory. Cael looked at the glasses on the shelf, still there after 5 years, still reminding students that broken things have value. It wasn't just you sitting beside me, he said slowly. It was you seeing me, treating me like I mattered when powerful people said I didn't. That contradiction between what the world told me I was and what you showed me I could be. It created space for something different. He turned to face her directly. You didn't save me, Amara, but you reminded me I was worth saving, and sometimes that's enough. Tears filled her eyes. I think that's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. Really? More romantic than the wedding vows? Those were beautiful, but this is true. They kissed, slow and gentle, while students pretended not to notice. When they pulled apart, a teenager approached nervously. Female, maybe 15. New student, Cael recognized her from orientation last week. Mr. Choi, she said quietly. Can I ask you something? Of course. The glasses on the shelf, someone told me they're yours, from when you were a student. Cael's chest tightened. They'd never officially confirmed it. Never wanted to make the safe room about his story instead of students' stories. But rumors circulated anyway. They are, he admitted. The girl studied them carefully. What happened to the person who wore them? He survived. It took a long time and cost a lot. But he survived. And now? Now he runs a school, loves his wife, tries to help other people survive. The girl nodded slowly. I was bullied at my last school. They broke my glasses, said I looked stupid. I've been wearing contacts since, but seeing these, she gestured at the shelf, made me think maybe I don't have to hide. Cael's throat closed completely. You don't, he managed. Glasses, contacts, whatever feels right. That's your choice. But you don't have to hide to be safe here. The girl smiled, small and fragile and genuine. Thank you, she said. Then she returned to her corner of the safe room, pulled out a book, started reading. Amara squeezed Cael's hand. Moments, she whispered. Moments, he agreed. They left the safe room together, walking through halls filled with students and teachers and the ordinary chaos of learning. In Cael's office, architectural plans for the expansion covered his desk. Financial reports showed sustainable operations. Letters from alumni talked about college acceptances and career opportunities, proof that the fragile experiment had become something real, something that mattered. Amara sat in the guest chair, studying him. What are you thinking? She asked. That I've spent 5 years trying to build something good, and I still don't know if it's enough. If it balances the scales for what I did before. It doesn't. The honesty startled him. You're not supposed to agree with that, he said. Why not? It's true. You can't erase 13 years of violence by building one school. Math doesn't work that way. Morality doesn't work that way. Then why do this? Because balance isn't the point. Growth is. Becoming someone different is. Choosing today over yesterday is. She leaned forward, expression serious. You'll carry what you did forever, Amara said. That weight doesn't disappear, but you can choose what you build on top of it, and you're building something worth the foundation. Cael absorbed that slowly. That's terrifying, he said finally. Living is terrifying, but you're doing it anyway. We're doing it anyway. She smiled, stood, crossed to him. They held each other in the quiet office while the school continued around them. Proof that broken people could build beautiful things. That survival was possible. That choosing love over power wasn't naive. It was the hardest, bravest thing anyone could do. Perchance. That evening, Cael and Amara walked through Hongdae toward their apartment. 5 years in the same small space with thin walls and noisy neighbors. They could afford better now. The school paid modest salaries and Cael's therapy practice generated income. But they'd chosen to stay. Chosen ordinary. Chosen community over isolation. They stopped at a convenience store, bought instant noodles and beer, headed upstairs. Their apartment was cluttered with architectural plans and student portfolios and books about trauma recovery. Photos covered the walls, the school's opening day, men's graduation, their small wedding with just family and close friends, a life built from ordinary moments. Amara cooked while Cael reviewed session notes from the trafficking survivor he'd met with that morning, thinking about how to connect her with resources without overwhelming her. They ate at their small table, talking about expansion plans and budget concerns, and whether Min would accept the teaching position they'd offered. Normal conversation, domestic problems, everything he'd never imagined wanting. After dinner, they sat on their tiny balcony, watching Seoul's lights stretch toward infinite horizons. "Do you ever miss it?" Amara asked. "The power, the certainty, knowing you could solve any problem through leverage?" "Sometimes," Cael admitted. "Usually when I'm exhausted and a problem feels impossible, and using fear would be so much easier than building consensus." "What stops you?" "You. This." He gestured at their ordinary apartment, ordinary life. "The knowledge that I'd rather fail at being human than succeed at being monstrous." Amara leaned against him, head on his shoulder. They sat in comfortable silence while the city breathed around them. "I'm pregnant," she said suddenly. Cael went absolutely still. "What?" "Pregnant 8 weeks, I found out yesterday. Was trying to figure out how to tell you." 1,000 emotions crashed through him simultaneously. Terror, joy, panic, wonder. "Are you sure?" "Very sure. Doctor confirmed it." Cael stood, paced the tiny balcony, mind racing. A child. His child. "I don't know how to be a father," he said. "I don't know how to raise someone when my own childhood was—" He stopped. "What if I mess them up? What if I'm too broken to—" Amara grabbed his hands, forced him to stop pacing. "You're going to mess up," she said calmly. "All parents do. But you're also going to try. You're going to show up. You're going to choose them over your fear, just like you've been choosing me. That's different." "How?" "You're an adult. You chose this knowing what I was. A child doesn't get to choose their parents." "No. But they get to experience you trying to be better. They get to see growth instead of perfection. That's valuable." Cael looked at her stomach. No visible change yet, but life growing there. Possibility. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "Good. That means you understand the stakes. What if I revert? What if stress triggers old patterns? What if I hurt them without meaning to? Then you apologize. You course correct. You keep trying." "Cael," her voice softened. "You're not your grandfather. You're not even the person you were 5 years ago. You're someone who chose to change when it cost everything. That person can be a good father." Tears filled his eyes. "Are you happy about this?" he asked. "Terrified and happy. Can both exist simultaneously?" "In my experience, the important things always do." He pulled her close, rested his hand gently on her stomach. Life growing there. A person who would never know the violence that built him. Who would grow up with the school and the safe room and parents who chose each other constantly. "We're really doing this," he said. "We're really doing this." They stood on their tiny balcony while Seoul's infinite light stretched towards horizons they'd never see. But the horizon visible from here was enough. More than enough. 9 months later, Cael held his daughter for the first time in a hospital room filled with ordinary miracles. She was tiny, perfect, terrifying. He'd faced down gang leaders and corrupt politicians and his own uncle trying to kill him. But holding 7 pounds of absolute vulnerability made every other fear seem insignificant. "What should we name her?" Amara asked from the hospital bed, exhausted and radiant. They'd discussed options for months. Traditional names, modern names, names with meaning. Cael looked at his daughter's sleeping face. Thought about the fragile boy with taped glasses. Thought about the woman who'd sat beside him. Thought about broken things being repaired. "Hannah," he said quietly. Amara smiled. "Like the student from opening day?" "Like the flower, like hope, like something beautiful growing from difficult soil." "Hannah Choi," Amara tested. "I love it." Cael carefully placed his daughter in Amara's arms, watching them together. His family. Built from choices instead of blood, from trying instead of certainty, from love that cost everything and was worth every price. Outside the hospital window, Seoul continued its endless sprawl. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, building families and careers and small moments of grace. And somewhere in that vast complexity, two people who'd once been broken had created something whole, not perfect, not simple, but real. Human. Enough. The fragile boy with taped glasses had survived long enough to build the impossible city he'd once sketched in secret. Not through power, through community, not through fear, through love. And the girl who'd once sat beside him in silence had become the reason he survived it all. Above them, the sky opened onto infinite possibility. Below them, Seoul pulsed with millions of interconnected lives. And in the space between, Cael Choi held his sleeping daughter and finally understood what his grandfather had never learned. That strength wasn't control. It was vulnerability. That power wasn't dominance. It was choice. That the bravest thing anyone could do was admit they were broken and try to heal anyway. The school would continue. Students would come and go. Some would thrive. Some would struggle. The safe room would hold thousands of moments where broken kids learned they mattered. Min would return to teach engineering. Hana would mentor new students. The community would keep building what one person could never construct alone. And through it all, Cael would keep trying, keep choosing, keep becoming someone worth the love he'd been given. Because 13 years ago, a girl had sat beside a boy in a cafeteria. One moment, one choice, one act of kindness that somehow changed everything. And now they were building a world where moments like that weren't accidents. They were architecture, deliberate, sustainable, worth every difficult choice, worth every scar, worth surviving for. Amara shifted in the hospital bed, looking at him with those steady eyes that had first seen him when he was invisible. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Cael looked at his daughter, at his wife, at the life they'd built from fragments and faith. "That I'm finally home," he said, "not in penthouse fortresses, not in empires built on fear. Here, with people who chose him when he was nothing and kept choosing him while he learned to be something. That was enough, more than enough, everything." Outside, Seoul's lights flickered against the evening sky, enormous, imperfect, alive. Inside, a family rested together in ordinary grace, and somewhere between the darkness they'd survived and the light they were building, Cael Choi finally allowed himself to hope. Not for perfection, not for redemption, but for tomorrow, and the day after. And all the fragile, beautiful, terrifying days that came after that. One choice at a time, one moment at a time, one breath at a time, together, always together. Home.